I have a PowerPoint.
Yes, you can
Hi.
share your PowerPoint if you wish. Yes.
How do I do that, love? Can I do it? Show me. Because it's a new, we have a new, I would like to be able to.
Okay, I'm going to put.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much. This is an amazing, this is brand new. We've never done this before. And to invite such a great panel, all of you who have volunteered, who were dragged into it, however you got here, welcome. And what we're going to do today is not obviously solve the global problems, but we're going to discuss them. And I'm thinking more in line along how deeply we are affected by the things that we don't even know are going on. And I think that's an extremely important thing to keep in mind, especially considering that we have what I call global anxiety. And this is something that Carl Jung was fascinated with as well, is that the concept of global anxiety is not new. I mean, it was probably going on in the cave days when somebody was running off with somebody else's bear. And so we're really, it's not new. I mean, but what Jung said, and it's one of the most important things that I've got up here in the collective works, he says, do not introject the collective unconscious because it will make you sick. And so what we're doing is we're becoming conscious of the collective unconscious in ways which I think the astrological pictures that we'll have, and I have a couple on my PowerPoint that show a few things, that we should be able to, somebody is a moderator, I'm assuming, that way we won't talk at once, even though it's exciting to do that. If we were in the living room, it'd be great, but we're not. And a lot of people are going to be watching this, which I think is really important. So what we say needs to be kept to, a kind of minimum, but at the same time pithy, really to the point. And none of us are what do you call them, inexperienced speakers. So I'd like to start by saying that the situation that we are now in on planet Earth is unprecedented. And we are not necessarily, as I said, going to be able to alter it, but we may look at it very differently so that we're not living in anxiety. I have to say that the numbers of clients who are suffering from a kind of free-floating anxiety, and then when I explain to them a little bit about what's going on, it actually makes them feel better. Don't you think that knowledge is power? And so let's go for it. Let's look at it. Let's do the WTF part going on. How do we want to start this? Let me know.
Okay, Ari, you have something to say?
Should I put my PowerPoint up? No.
Yes, please. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
It's up, Erin, if you want to go to the next page.
Next page. This image is fabulous. I mean, it's just an image, and I think that's what really speaks very loudly. And when I came across this, as I often find the most wonderful pictures, when I came across this, I really looked at it and I realized there's a picture of a mother holding her baby, kissing the world on either side. And then we have all of the religious iconography littering the peace symbol. And, religion has often been, one of the most ugly situations that we can fall into, as well as the most exalted. And at this stage, I mean, it was back in 1986, and I was sitting on the porch in Montreal, talking to a really great friend, and having a glass of wine. And she says, "When do you think that the global war is going to begin?" And I said, "Oh, it's already begun. You know, we're already there, 1986, and we're already, you know, experiencing the sort of rumble, not of the First World War, the Second World War, civil wars, and so on, but we're experiencing a global phenomenon, which is absolutely phenomenal, yeah, for lack of a better word. So, has anybody got anything? Because I have a series of slides. I'm not sure how to move you guys. I'm looking at everybody right now. It's really nice.
Erin, you can move the panel, move that whole panel over.
Yeah.
By pressing your mouse on the top and just float it over.
I dragged it to the top.
Drag it, yes, got it.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. So that I can I can put this on the side as well, I think, the
Yes.
remote control. Hang on. Okay, all right, great. This is the beginning of the end. The beginning is always before the end. This obviously didn't work. I mean, I was there. And so, you know, in 1966, there was a huge uprising. And then it got into the 66, 67. And Ronald Reagan was president of the United States. And he was an extremely influential individual. And I actually have a couple of pillows that are really cute, like literally pillowcases that say, but he made a movie called Bedtime for Bonzo. And so Bedtime for Bonzo is now sitting in my bedroom on the floor as little plush pillows. And it shows the movie that he actually played in. I mean, that was the kind of movies that he made. This was a Reagan era. Okay, and then into Nixon. And then into Nixon, where I had a bumper sticker where I cut it. I had two bumper stickers, and I said, Nix on Nixon. But, you know, we tried. I mean, I'm 72 a couple of days ago, and I was probably 18 or 20, you know, during this period of time. And so here we have, you know, an attempt, and it's working. Because, see, these people, these MPs who are meant to be our enemies in the 60s, are people too who have children and who actually did hear it, but there was nothing they could do, because there's something about the collective unconscious that is, you know, a dynamic that needs to be full of even one more person than the negative side. So if we have a collective unconscious wherein all of us are experiencing and engaged in a dialectic that is, you know, a global dialectic, then we have to be extremely conscious on a daily basis of what we say and what we do. But when I loved this photograph because, you know, the police, they don't know what to do. There's all these beautiful people standing there, and they're going, we're supposed to shoot these people? You know, I mean, how can we do this? They're gorgeous. And so that was one of the images. And this is supposed to be, I don't know if you can see that, but it says all the good stuff is here and you are here. The next slide I have is it's a roll of the dice. Okay, now this is where we're at now, okay, is that we are in a situation in which you might as well roll dice as opposed, you know, as to sit on a panel, yeah? But that doesn't mean that we can't express ourselves as astrologers with a vast amount of information that is not really privy to the collective, because most of them are starving, dying, floating around in rivers, trying to cross borders. You know, I mean, the collective is not in a good place. We are in good places because we're all sitting in comfortable places with pictures on our walls and, you know, technical da-da-da. And so we're all okay, sort of, except there is within us a rage, an anger that is necessary. It really is, in order to get through what was considered to be the most influential and possibly one of the most amazing poems that was written by Blake. Now a fourfold vision see, and a fourfold vision is given to me. 'Tis fourfold in my supreme delight, and threefold in soft Beulah's night, and twofold always. May God keep us from single vision and Newton's sleep. So this is a picture of Blake using calipers to design the world. It hasn't worked. It's not that tidy. Now, of the panelists, I mean, I think that I can just say, well, if you have anything to offer now, would be really great, because we do have a couple of hours, which is fabulous. And so it really gives everybody a chance to speak, someone who wants to. And I know that several of you I can see when I look through the list of, God, there's so many people who really do have things to say. And this is my world, and this is your world, and it's a very pretty one. But it's also drying up. It is losing its, temperature gauge. And this is all part of what we have done with our science and Newton's single vision. And I'm not against science. In fact, I love it. That's part of what I do. Astrology is a science. And the planetary array, as we see it when we look every day at the ephemeris, which I always do, which I'm not here to sort of ball out the younger folks, but, I really, really think that you need to look at the ephemeris every day and see what's going on. Yeah? I don't know if you can see me doing that. But if you look every single day and you track it, you can see how fast planets move. They're moving back, they're forth. But it's very important for us to become engaged in a very almost physical way with the planetary array, so that we are capable of experiencing the planetary array as a phenomenon that will actually carry on. And then if we have clients or students, then we can also teach them better when we are made more aware of what is going on in our world. And so this isn't really, as I say, a 2-hour talk on the misery and the loss of what's going on. But I think astrologically, it would be very interesting to hear what each one of you, if you feel like speaking, has really noticed. I mean, on January 20th, we've got the Saturn Pluto conjunction. Well, we've been banging on about that for about a year. Everybody's just been building and building and building. The more energy you put into something, the bigger it gets. So the Saturn Pluto conjunction on the 20th of January in 2020 is now become a global phenomenon, and it's embedded in our psyche. And this is not a really good image, even though I was born during a Mars-Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Leo, very tight conjunction, scoring my Scorpio sun rising. So I'm pretty much in touch with that. And I've had to deal with all levels of it personally. And now I'm looking at, a situation where it's not about me. It really is about us, all of us. And so we as interpreters, if you will, of the cosmos, it's really our job. It's our job is to explain things to people, to reduce the level of anxiety by finding within their natal horoscopes the places where they can go that actually give them the most, power. So they're empowered, but they're also at peace, understanding more about the parts of themselves that are going to be able to, educate their children, etc. I have grandchildren who are like 19, 21, and 23. and a grandchild, a great grandchild coming along. So it's going to be very, very important for me to see how the world will be then. They will adapt. Everyone's going to adapt. That's not the point. It's the consciousness that we want to be able to change. We may not be able to completely arrest the melting of glaciers and the shifting of, this has been going on since Earth was formed. So there's certain things that we just have to get, accept. But some things that we have to, really look at is, we want our world back. Yeah. This guy wants his ball. Yeah. And if a kid is crying for his ball, he should have his ball. Really. You don't ball him out because he wants his ball. At least he shouldn't. And so this is where we're going to go from here. I want my ball, and you want your ball, the Earth. So what have you been thinking? What are you going to tell people? Shall we open up?
Erin, we've got a couple of folks who've got their hands raised. Sol had her hand up first, so Sol, please go ahead and unmute.
Oh, did I?
I don't have. Okay, I guess
I think Ari was before me, but okay.
There you are.
I'll just go. Hello, Erin. I was just saying hi. It's nice to meet you. I've been reading your book, Saturn in Transit, with great passion. I love this.
This is my first book, Saturn Pluto.
Yeah. Well, you write there in the preface. You write that I think it is. I remember something like, I was meditating a year on the principle of Saturn. Writing this book was like marinating in Saturn energy, and you didn't quite recommend it. I'm not sure if I remember that correctly, but it's a little bit the same you said there about, the importance of the focus and the importance to maintain a strong connection to the, what I would naturally call the higher aspects of the collective unconscious, these realms where we can move through with a little bit of liberation and detachment. And I'm actually looking forward to Saturn's entrance into Aquarius, because that is definitely, I think, will definitely being Aquarius being a sign of solutions, and actually also it's also a sign that I very often associate with Buddhism. And in Buddhism, they have this excellent concept that is detachment, but not detachment without heart.
One thing, hey, Erin, you might want to stop sharing your screen.
I'm sorry?
You might want to stop sharing your screen.
Oh, well.
Oh, okay.
I'll stay detached.
Anyway. Okay, so we want to see the rest. Oh, yeah, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
No, don't be. We are at this end of this Saturn Pluto cycle, and there's all this letting go of everything. And I think that's the increased anxieties as well. It's always scary when a cycle comes to an end, and it's like the whole system is trembling a little bit. But I put my faith in Saturn in Aquarius, because I really think that we, through our discipline of our minds in particular, and how we project out, because that sort of changes our days a lot. Imagine you are on the internet and you start debating endlessly about something. You will be full of poisonous energies when the day is over. You will be full of the war. Any of us will be full of the war we are trying to kill, in a way. So I think, the only way to deal with this collective aggressiveness that we find in the unconscious, the collective unconscious, will be through detaching from it on a personal level, not get so triggered all the time. And I think that, I'm a firm believer, being Aquarius myself, of these, we're all like these bees in a beehive. And if I lit up, my friend will lit up. And that's just like this inner revolution that spreads throughout the globe. Yeah. So I'm really hopeful, like I'm not I have children too, I sleep well at night, because in a way I know that this, it's a natural evolution, and every evolution is critical. We don't like change. We fear death, which is one of the most misunderstood aspects of life because we don't really,
No, we don't know about death. We don't know.
It's like a dual thing, one part of us wants the change and the other resists it. And, having died, I must say, many times in this life, not physically, of course, but many aspects of me have died. I see that every death is a crisis, and every time I'm reborn into, I would say a more efficient self, where energy is not lost so easily, I really feel this joy and love. So that gives me hope for everybody else as well.
Okay, Sol, we really must limit to 2 minutes.
That was 2 minutes.
Very
in my world.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
how would you like to proceed?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna. Well, what you immediately reminded me of when you were speaking of this business of unconscious and being conscious is that it was in volume 9.2, Carl Jung actually talks about the age of Aquarius as the Pisces as the image of a dying age, which is really interesting because he was born a long time ago, and he wasn't an astrologer, but he understood large cycles. And I think that this is what we're looking at, is that we're looking at a natural, on one level, a natural death of an epoch to 2,400 years, however, within give or take 100 years or 3. I think we're really moving toward a massive shift in the globe that will not kill it necessarily. It's very likely it can adapt, but we have to be able to experience it from our astrology and looking at it, because this is obviously an astrology workshop in a sense, and sharing information. And so, when you mention the Aquarius, that's a very interesting thing, because it's the sign before Pisces, which is, of course, the dissolution. Yeah, Aquarius is the constellation of various and sundry bits and pieces that create, a consciousness. And Pisces is going into the unconscious, in the sense of, let's see what's going to be next. And this is what we're leaving, is this Piscean age of dreams and entering into the Aquarian age of thoughts. And that's a good thing. Did you want me to put my
Erin, I just want to share a little info there about Carl Jung. He was actually born with Saturn in Aquarius and a Sun-Uranus conjunction, although wide. So that is very interesting. He was a visionary, so little wonder he actually tuned in.
He was a visionary, and unlike Freud, with whom he was very close. And I've looked at both of their horoscopes and their relationship and done workshops on it. And it was an important shift, as if to say that Freud was the old world and Jung was the new world. Yeah, and just like that, as far as thinking goes. Of course, now Jung is also history, but he's a good historian. Yeah. In other words, I can read Jung now as a historian, as opposed to, here he's telling me the truth because I'm mature enough, my age, and have studied enough, that I can just let go of the fact that the other people do know a lot. Okay, so how do I share my screen?
Erin, you click on the green button.
Yep, share. Okay.
There it is. And Ari Moshe has something to say. Or shall we just?
Yeah. Let me just put my screen up.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm trying. Oh, there it is. This baby. Poor baby.
It is. Great.
Little guy. Let me just change this. There we go. All right. Please, Ari, speak.
Hello. Okay. So yeah, you want your screen up. Cool.
Hi.
Hey everyone. Thanks for creating this space, Erin. Good to be with you all. The day the world changed beyond the boundaries of Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. So what arises for me to speak a little bit about, we have right now it's sort of this precious phase of Saturn moving towards Pluto. And this is that moment before the conjunction. So it's very powerful. It's like a buildup of energy. And in the collective, what this really says is that there's a cycle that's coming to completion. So internally and externally, and it's all internally, the conditioning of our own consciousness, the constructs and the parameters that have defined our sense of self. There's profound introspection, revelation, healing in our blossoming awareness of all the ways that we hold structure, form, construct as primary to our own reality. So I want to explain what I'm saying a little bit. You know, Saturn and Capricorn
Getting it.
corresponds to the idea of law, right? Wherever you go, you got laws. So, you know, in your government and in your society, there are laws. And laws have the purpose of creating some level of cohesion and clarity, and they set parameters and boundaries so that we can all operate within them and function in a good way. But laws are often misunderstood in that laws aren't original to reality. Laws are something that you can follow, which means they're also something you cannot follow.
In
And if
other
you
words,
don't follow a law,
they exist, and we then translate them into something else. Laws
yeah,
are part of that.
that's right. And we can break a law, and if we break a law, there's a consequence. And if you follow the law, then there's also a consequence. But what happens to our conditioning in our consciousness is we often take the law as original, right? We forget that laws are something that we are creating and putting on the wide open fabric of reality.
Right.
That reality itself isn't bound by rules and laws, and even the laws of gravity. It's a law, right? And laws are different than reality. And there's something really important to reflect upon this, because at this time, Saturn and Pluto coming together in Capricorn, and it's going to be really intense, you know, the way it always works when there's a new phase. That's when things really start to pick up momentum. So there is a big process of unraveling our conditioning, and Capricorn and Saturn is all about the law, the rules. But it's how we've basically said, this is the world we live in. This is how you're supposed to behave. This is what it's like to be a human. This is what's normal as a man, as a woman, as a human. This is what it looks like to be on this earth. This is what relationship looks like. This is what, I mean, all these constructs that are basically these impositions of right and wrong. What's allowed, what's not allowed. Who I'm supposed to be, who I'm not supposed to be. And all of that creates so much repression. And the thing is, because we've taken rules and laws and structures and boundaries as primary, right? Like we grow up and our authority figures say, you know, act this way. And if you do these chores, even if you don't love it, or if you don't really do it sincerely, if you say thank you, then I'll, you know, be pleased by you. I'll give you a sticker. We're trained to be inauthentic. We're trained to follow things, but to not actually develop wisdom and self-mastery. And so I'll end with this point. You know, when you're a child, you
Yes.
don't yet have the wisdom and the ability to understand the greater and complex interreality around you. You have to follow the rules, right? You have to follow the laws of your parents. They say, hold my hand when I cross the street. Look both ways, and don't cross the street until you ask me. You have to follow the rules because you don't know better. But that child matures and grows up. What happened is they realized, oh, those rules, they were important for me because they were protecting me before I understood more than I now understand. But now I can live with respect and balance with the street, with the traffic. I have more agency. And so I can look both ways and cross the street because I'm more conscious and aware. So this is the time to realize how a lot of the conditioning and the ways we've been repressing ourselves and holding ourselves back are self-imposed limitations that maybe for a while at different stages of development and growth, we said, well, these rules are necessary. If I'm vulnerable, I'm going to get hurt, right? Or if I'm, you know, if I don't save and I'm super careful with my money and my resources, I'm going to have a survival crisis. And we have all these constructs in our consciousness. So when we enter this new phase, there's such an invitation for all of us right now to practice bringing our attention back to our own soul directive in life. What does Creator want of us? What wants to unravel on our own soul journey? It gets harder to see clearly when we're constantly imposing our ideas of how things should go and who we're supposed to be. It's constantly repressing a greater potential that only arises when we claim our mastery, our agency, our ability to live in balance in a good way with life. So I'll just say this and then I'll close, keep on almost closing. I was recently thinking about this project that I need to do. Because I'm having greeting my daughter coming into this world in 5 weeks. We're giving birth. And so I have all these things. I want to get rid of, fix these things and take care of all these things. And I created this timeline. And then I had this moment of realizing, oh, I don't know if it's true that I need to take care of all of these things before my daughter is born. Maybe I'm not supposed to take care of all these things, right? The dialogue that we hold, it doesn't mean I'm not going to take care of these things, that I'm going to ignore it. But the way that I'm thinking about it is actually inaccurate. It's not real. When I create these constructs of time, deadlines, it's imposing upon the natural order of things this added construct of like punishment, deadline. I have this much time. But that's not how we look at things in life, right? If it is in flow and in harmony and balance and healthy to my own nature and to life, these things will get done.
Yes.
It will be optimal.
Maybe
But
we'll
to
have
impose
a script.
an idea that it has to exist within a construct of time and space, we create that. So my blessing for all of us during this time is to find a lot more spaciousness, to unravel and see how we're kind of pulling the rug from our own feet. Like we're creating difficulties for ourselves with a lot of our own unrealized conditioning. And this is a ripe time to look at that and find more peace and permission in our lives.
Thank you. That put a lot of light in. I love the way you verbalize what's happening. That business of being, having to have everything ready for the baby is a scream, because if the baby comes a bit early and the crib isn't, set up, whatever. Yeah, and the baby is there, and that's what matters. It's what we get. Yeah, the baby is fine. As long as it's loved, and you can wrap it up, and it'll be fine.
And it's like, I can't do it without a crib. Well, if I have a baby and there's no crib, life will still go on, right? It's we create these incredible, like, it has to happen. Otherwise, what, right?
Yes, and wait until it's 16 and the crib isn't, you're trying to keep it in the crib. It'll have words. You'll have something to say. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Erin, we have Ryan with us who'd like to speak. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely fine.
Fantastic. Ryan, please go ahead. 2 minutes, Ryan.
All right. Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for pulling this together, Linda and Erin. Wow, what a treat that we all get to put our minds and hearts together and try to solve the problems of humanity and the mysteries of the universe.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again. This is good.
Yeah, right. So here's my 2 cents. And so for whatever it's worth, I don't know, maybe you can remember, maybe you can recall or imagine those days when we Homo sapiens were diverging from the Homo sapiens Neanderthals.
Exactly. In one day, there were 5,000 Neanderthals in the south of France, and the next day there were none.
So while I don't have a chart for those years, it feels like what is going on right now. Ever since Star Wars came out and we youngsters felt like the possibility of there being a force that connects all things in the universe, we thought that we could individually have that power within us. Wow, I believe it was somewhere around that time, the discovery of Chiron, maybe, where
76.
Where we started really evolving into the next chapter of humanity. I've heard it called Homo sapiens lumens, the people of light. So if we are undergoing a biological evolution, then we need to each individually do the Pluto process. And the Pluto process, among a million other things, is a necessary endarkenment, wherein we go into the wound, where we go into the darkness, where we go into the shadow, and we inject what light we can. So this process has been strong since its discovery back in 1930. And with the recent Pluto-Uranus square, we were asked to really do some deep healing and find some breakthroughs in defining exactly who we were, regardless of whatever has ever been. Well, now Pluto and others are squaring Eris.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're bringing this up, Ryan. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, but a little later on, I actually have those charts.
Great.
I'm prescient, you see. I know what people want. But don't you see what Einstein says? You can't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. Can you?
Correct. So
yes.
if I consider some of the major themes of Eris, Eris was not allowed to the party because of her purple hair, her nose rings, and her naughty children. So if we consider the pantheon of gods, goddesses to be parts of ourselves, what Eris then represents is a fragmentation of our soul. We have lost pieces of our soul over millennia. And so if we are to engage in this evolutionary leap, then what we need to do is Pluto square Eris, do the incredibly hard shamanic work of reintegrating fragmented parts of our soul. So the parts of us who have the naughty children, the parts of us who have the purple hair and nose rings, the parts of us that we didn't want invited to our own party, that we need to set a place for them at the table and reintegrate them. And here's where I plug Patricia Walsh's work as being so incredibly essential to this process, because it's being able to use the astrology and look at that as a doorway in which to go back and really reclaim fragmented parts of ourselves. And
Ryan, thank you, Ryan. Yes, you've made the point. Let's move along. Let's move along.
Okay.
Erin, please, we want to hear from you, Erin.
I got hung up there on the word Eris, which and her, showing up at the wedding party uninvited. Eris in Greek means strife, and so strife is something that shows up at the wedding or at the party or in our own heads. And so when we're in strife and Eris has shown up, then we have to really realize that what we've created is some outsider, uninvited person or thing or thought form has entered our space. And I love this cartoon where he says, Einstein, obviously, you can't solve a problem from the same consciousness that created it. So we have to start thinking in terms of, maybe not even thinking, okay, but just feeling our way through it. And then if we can think and we're literate and we enjoy writing, then we can write about it, or talk. But I think it's really important what you were saying about the whole issue of trying not to, feed the devil. Yeah, we don't want to feed the devil. And so that's what's going on right now. But the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it does happen very regularly, except for the fact that Pluto is very naughty in that it has an elongated orbit, as we all know, and therefore it spends longer and longer and longer times as it heads out toward the sign of Taurus. When I had Pluto transiting back and forth 4 times over my Sun ascendant, squaring on Mars, Saturn, Pluto, and Leo, I had a couple of my most close friends die. I lost a lot. I gained a lot. I wrote 7 books. And it was like, okay, so people are dying. I'm writing books. I'm becoming, what I really needed to become. And I mean, the best thing about writing is having written. That's the best part about it. But what you're talking about there, I think, is extremely relevant when it comes to not introjecting, because this is the theme word that I'm trying to say is, do not introject the collective unconscious, but try to maybe invade the collective unconscious with some of these very interesting and positive thinking thoughts. Yeah.
Excellent.
And
So, Erin, can we move on to another speaker?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then we'll go back to your slide. Keep it up on the screen for us, please, Erin. Anthony, go ahead.
Yes. Well, talking about the situation in general, what the blank is going on, there's 3 quick things I just want to briefly say. One, among other places, the Seth material was talked about when it was first published in the 70s, that we are in the middle of a shift, capital T, capital S. And it's a shift in society that we haven't seen, according to Seth, since the Christ consciousness first entered. That's over 2,000 years ago. I kind of find that this so-called shift that Seth talks about loosely ties into the ages of of astrology. We just left the age of Pisces, which was very Christian. Everybody loved one another and a whole blending of personalities. We're entering the age of Aquarius, or just entered it. We can fight forever about when that started. But now we have the world, people being aware of the world. And now everybody...
I think it leaks in slowly.
Yes, and I think what's happening now is we're folding over. Everybody is responsible for everybody else. There's a sense that the Aquarian is working to fix society, whether it's the water bearer bringing water back to the village. So I think all of us are, yes, united and collected as one. We also have to remember we all matter, and every one of us contributes to the world. The second thing I want to say about what is going on right now, Neptune is in the middle of Pisces. When you have an outer planet go through its rulership, it takes about halfway through to get it ready. And as far as I'm concerned, Neptune's at 16 today. Up until today, it has been fake news, madness, irrational idealism going on. Let's bring America back 500 years. Let's bring America 1,000 years into the future. And now we're getting to a point halfway through Pisces where suddenly people are like, wait a minute, maybe socialism works. Wait a minute, maybe the rich shouldn't have so much money. This sense and awareness of social justice is turning up too. We're in the middle of what's
going on in the 60s. I mean, we tried to
the 60s were practiced. We screwed up the 60s completely.
So you think it's a trial run? It didn't work.
Yeah, I think it didn't work because Jerry Rubin came along and said, let's everybody run back inside and be bankers now. And they all ran away in terror.
Oh, yeah. So I know people.
Quickly.
Be careful who you speak of.
Yes, I know. I think what happened is that Virgo broke up, the Uranus-Pluto conjunction broke up all the rules, and we created no new rules that suited the new behavior. So they went back to the old rules. That's what happened to the 60s. What's happening?
This is the keynote chart for the 60s. The status quo is being opposed by the revolution, Mars, Pluto, Uranus. And
we never found a way to codify it. We never found a way to make it useful. Everybody was doing their own thing, and there was no connection. And what started as one group became 15 groups because everything fragmented. I lived through the 60s too. It was a wonderful idea, and we broke a lot of rules, but we didn't create anything of any permanence or substance. That's why I think the Neptune, Capricorn, Uranus trying to the 60s stuff, and the Pluto trying to the 60s, Uranus and Pluto, are all helping us. The 60s are still being born. Whatever was started in the 60s is still being worked out. And I think we have a time now with Neptune in the second half of Pisces to move in that direction, for America to be reborn, for the world to be reborn, which means we have to break up, last thing I'm going to say, all of our old habits.
The astrology is always really interesting, isn't it? because what I'm looking at here is a kind of an opposition, and then when we get to the result, by 2020, we end up with a Mars-Saturn conjunction as opposed to a Mars-Saturn opposition, and it's square to Pluto, and it's square to Uranus. So it kind of blew out and became this T-cross. Yeah, that opposition became a T-cross, which is a lot more stressful. An opposition is a direct confrontation. Yeah, and then when it evolves towards the period that now begins our era, what we end up with is, a kind of relationship, if you will, between Mars and Saturn, agreeable. Opposite Uranus saying, they're still saying, screw you. But it's the Pluto part that's so concerning, because it T-bones that opposition. And so that's where we're looking at a very, very dangerous period of time.
I think it's dangerous, but I think it's very positive too, because you can't, part of what's happening now is we have to identify all the problems. We have to identify all the crimes and all the shit that's hitting the fan. That has to be ID'd before we can heal it. So what's happening is people like the government are doing their very best at showing us everything that's wrong with the government. And now it's up to us to do something about it. The second half of healing is recognizing the problem and then taking steps to do something about it. And that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, Aries having a new baby. I mean, I've got all these kids, and I can't tell you the level of improvement that has taken place from from who I was to who they are. And their consciousness has taken this in. And I talk to them, and when you talk to them too, I can tell. And that, they know that it's happening. It's taken for granted that it's a revolution, a massive revolution that's breaking up the status quo. And the conscious kids, ones who are fortunate enough not to be floating around in boats or stuck at the border in Mexico, or all of that kind of awful stuff that controllers are trying to take care of, isn't working. And, these younger people are not, they just don't think that way. Or obviously not all of them. And I'm privy to a certain type of person. And so I'm taking the positive side. But I'm also seeing that, there cannot be an ending. Something can't die without there being a ceremony of some type. So we need to create, conscious ceremony, conscious, like you're saying, meditative situations. Think positively, have a little, even if it's corny, something to say every day that actually enhances your sense of how you feel. And I mean, so what you're saying, and I think it is valid, very good. I'm very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well,
I can't stick around. Thank you, everybody. I got to go, but bless you all and see you down the road.
Yep, you will. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet.
Thank you, Anthony.
Oh, my pleasure.
Erin, would you like to speak more about this slide, or shall we move to another speaker? Just let me know when you're ready. Okay.
Do you know what this? You want to know what this is? This is where it all started, in the latter years of the age of Pisces. Do you know where this is? This is the Kuwaiti Stock Exchange. They are the richest people in the entire world. They hold the financial world in its hands. I took this picture, and I was so annoyed because there were like about 100 Arab guys standing around in dish dashes in front of this whilst we were driving by, but I managed to get this picture, and look at it, it says give way. Okay, well, all right, we'll give way to the Arab culture, whom, individual Arabs are fine, they're different. I hung out with them for quite a while when I was in the Middle East. However, there is an element to a shift that took place on a collective and on a social and also on a cultural level. And so it is interesting because, if we go back to the origin of the Pisces age, as has been done just slightly, that was an Arab period. And so we've come back into an Arabian period wherein, all of the money, basically, the money, I mean, the king of, actually, the richest man in the world is actually in Russia. However, the richest culture in the world, along with all of its slaves, are the Arabs. And so everybody wants to blame them. I myself could also feel the same way as a double Scorpio, square Mars, Saturn, Pluto, and Leo. Problem is, if I think that way, then I'm full of hate. And I can't do that because it makes me feel sick, I just don't like how it feels. How it feels is I like to know that I was in this place where people were making, we're essentially celebrating, if you will, the end of the world as we know it. And so there's a nice shot of all these brand new fancy cars. Every single Kuwaiti is paid, gets everything covered every month for everything they need, and no one else does. The Bedouins are still stuck out in their beautiful tents. I love the Bedouins, and their camels and so on, with nothing. But every single Kuwaiti citizen is covered financially every month. So I thought that was very interesting. So I put that up. When we go into, let me just move this guy, Saturn, Aquarius, Capricorn. Let's go back to this. Is anybody else, all right, does anybody have anything to say about what I was saying?
I think Sol had something to say. Go ahead, Sol.
No?
Sol?
Yeah. Oh, hey. Yes, I just wanted to say something about being positive and about the children. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good. Wonderful. Because, this is so important for me because, whenever, I think, right now we're one Saturn cycle away from the dawn of the internet, and we've seen this internet been spreading itself with super rapid power. And even Patti Smith, she said in a wonderful speech that the internet is in its youth right now. We don't really know how it will affect us on a collective consciousness level, right? And it's really like this. It's kind of like this, we get to see what is coming up through the collective mind in many ways. It's like for good and bad, right? But it can be really...
But I think this fits very well with what you were saying and what people are saying about Aquarius, because you see the function of Aquarius is to individuate. Now, individuation, the word itself means to be against dividing. Yeah. So the whole idea of individuating means bringing all of the parts of the self together in the soul, in the self, and to integrate them so they are in harmony as opposed to warring with each other. Every time that there was a planet that was usurped by an outer planet, something took place. When Uranus took over Saturn must have been really pissed off because Saturn, it's two places. Wow, 9th, 10th house. And all of a sudden, there it is. The usurpation, if you will. And I mean, this is, and Neptune, this is the first time that we've had a Neptune return in this time frame.
Yeah, that's true.
It returned to Aquarius where it was sighted conjunct Saturn. And then it moved into Pisces. And what's interesting is that when Neptune was in Pisces last, oil was discovered. And Neptune rules oil. So we have a lot of practical things too, that are very important when we look at astrology. We need to look at keywords and lists as well as our sort of more sort of entertaining thoughts that we have, and also the really important human thoughts, because I really focus, I definitely take in the big picture, but my love is to to help other people understand that there is an organized system that will not go away. This is not going to go away. And in that system, there are going to be conflicts between, for example, the wild Mars versus the very calculating Pluto, and then the highly structured and very limited Saturn. This is, and then along comes this break. Let's break through that one. We're going to break through that, and we're going to become much, much more individual and individuated. So the epoch of Aquarius will have more to do with detachment than it will from enmeshment, because when Neptune usurped Jupiter, Zeus, Poseidon and Zeus, there was, that was a really intense period of time, because what was going on was the loss of boundaries in government and in areas that had control over whole nations, like really, really had control over nations. People started traveling more. It was, a time of wandering. And so I think Neptune in Pisces is about floating about, and that Uranus now is really about individuating. So we can have our souls and have it float about, and we can, have our visions and our understandings of a more spiritual nature than Zeus the lawmaker. And then we can have our individuation out of the contained Saturn, where you're supposed to be the same all the time, rigid. And then we can have God knows what with Pluto versus the Mars, angry, enraged Mars. And all of these bodies, by the way, over a very short period of evolution, I mean, if I go back to sort of Michael Bajan, my old friend Michael Bajan, who wrote Mesopotamia Astrology, and he also wrote all those books with Richard Lee, who, by the way, many of you won't know, is Liz Green's brother. And so Richard Lee, I know, no, they were geniuses, the two of them. Between the two of them, we had pretty much brain power in the room. And so it was a lot of fun talking. Also great senses of humor. And I think you have to see the dark side to have a good sense of humor. Don't you think so?
Yeah, definitely. That's the dark side of Aquarius.
I think that if you can't laugh, I came out of a family that had black humor. I'm a Scorpio. I got Sun, Scorpio, Pluto. My parents both had Scorpio rising. The whole family. We would sit together, and it was absolute. It was absolute mayhem, because it was nothing but laughter and really, really dark sort of jokes. And I think that that's what we need, is more humor. Is we need to look at the humorous side, which is kind of hard right now. It really is. And because we're introjecting the collective unconscious and its anxieties and all of its fear and the terror of the unknown. And like Einstein said, you have to know what you're thinking as opposed to living in the unknown. And because we don't know really what's going to happen, the anxiety is very high. And anxiety is always associated with Uranus, simply because it's about individuation and change, and without knowing what it is and accepting it. And so I think that's what we're doing, is we're trying to work with the outer planets, as they're now known, and see how can we go there instead of being stuck in the old way, in the old laws, and with war and rage. Every culture that takes over another culture automatically absorbs their gods, and then they rename them, which is, I think, a really nice way of evolving. Sort of, because you saw my first picture of religion and what it looks like to me. But I think that when we do really understand the astrological symbolism, we are then introjecting the collective unconscious in a positive way. Because even though the unconscious, like say Mars, which is, was the god of war, Eris, in the Greek period, when the Romans took over, they named him, and he was considered to be the founder of Rome, along with Venus, along with a whole bunch of other characters. But Mars then became the god of agriculture. So we turned from the god of war, of swords, into the god of plowshares. So it was almost biblical, from swords into plowshares. So, everything is going to move, just like all of our old style way of looking at astrology. It's all going to shift. It doesn't mean that we have to invent weird and alternative ways of thinking. It means that we have to be open to alternative ways of thinking, even if they're weird, which is pretty much Uranus.
Okay. Oh, Erin.
All right.
That's a great point. Thank you. Can we now hear from Louise? Go ahead, please, Louise.
Hi, Erin. Hi, Linda. Thanks for inviting me on.
Hi, Louise. Gosh, good to see you as a person. You're real.
Yes, I'm real. Again.
Yeah, as a person, excellent. Welcome.
Yeah. Hi. Okay, so how to sum up in 2 minutes is a huge subject, but ditto to a lot of what other people have said. It's I wasn't very clear about what we were going to talk about, really, but yes, we're coming.
Neither was I.
We're coming to the end of several cycles, really. Major cycles, and you talked in the original thing about people being angry and anxious and rage, and I think this is the fear of change and of they see structures collapsing and
Absolutely
man-made hierarchies, they're changing. My perspective from the astrology and from what I've witnessed with my clients is that we've shaped our world really through our language, and that's changing as we move into this age of Aquarius. And I have this theory that the age of Aquarius with its waves is actually the new wave theory in science that's being developed. Well, it's not so new now, but in quantum theory. And that through wave theory, we're rediscovering and reimagining our connection with the cycles of life and the entanglement of the web that we all live in. And I think we're going to start changing the language we use to
that's been, yes, that's something that old people always complain about, is the language is changing.
Yeah, I mean, I've just written this book, and it was influenced a lot by the work of Jason Holley, who's talking about introducing the astrology of sect, which is the ancient, in a new way, and psychologizing it and using day and night and twilight instead of masculine and feminine.
Yes, that's fine. That's a good way.
And I see a lot of all this stuff that's happening in Capricorn as kind of reimagining and rediscovering our connection with the cycles of life. Because in older myths, Saturn was actually death, but the death doula, the grief walker, not scary death. People understood that we live, we die, we birth. So
Saturn was the limit, and then when we got to Pluto, that was serious death.
Exactly. And as we move forward with all these things upcoming, we're going to have 5 exact squares of Pluto to Eris from January 2020 till October 2021. And I see Eris as really shaking up all our perceptions again. We've also got the other dwarf planets, the newly discovered.
Eris was the unwelcome guest at the wedding. I mean, Eris was literally in Greek means trouble.
Yeah. He threw the apple in, saying to the fairies to shake up everybody's perceptions. And
Well, Aphrodite is always responsible for all the bad stuff. Remember that. Yeah.
oh yeah, I get it.
He was
So
naughty.
there's an awful lot to say, but my basic theory is that we are moving into a time, and this is what brings me hope, because I have children too. They're 19 and 22, and the world does seem to be collapsing, but I think we're actually kind of reimagining the connection, rediscovering the connection, which is why socialism's started to see the possibility again. We're rediscovering indigenous ways. Shamanism is coming back. So Aquarius is really going to be a mix of the old, the Saturn, and the Uranus, the new, reinvented in new ways. So that's kind of where I see it going. So
Thank you, Louise.
Thank you so much, Louise, for contributing and being here. I was looking at my bookshelf because I have a book called Reimagining the World, and it's not my book, but someone else's. And I was thinking, indeed, we have to reimagine, re-image, our way of looking at things. I think there is some power in it, like that jokey Einstein shot I put up. I think
I love that was up there.
Yeah, if we are aware of what we say and how we behave and what we think, and we realize that it's painful or difficult, then what we're going to have to realize is that's the way we are thinking. It isn't necessarily the way it is. Yeah. And so that's where the horoscope, a person's individual moment in time, can be expressed, of course, in millions of ways, because the moment of time has billions of people in it. But I think when we're looking at someone's horoscope and counseling, working with them, we need to get to the place where they are most afraid. And that's where we can begin, because then we can begin with, let's get you not afraid, and then we can talk. Yeah. And so the fear, that's the thing that we're working on in our consciousness now, is fear. I don't have television, for example. I just watch Netflix and, Prime. And so I watch movies and I kind of know what the news is, but I know enough to keep me up to date. To introject that and to make that my reality, I can't afford it. I just can't afford it emotionally. And so I'm thinking, I will use my work of 50 years as an astrologer to reimagine my world, and to reimage it, which doesn't mean that I'm going to live in a dream world. I'm not. I mean, it just is not possible. There's a lot of dark when you're heavy Scorpio. But to reimage it can be done through astrological work. And so if counsel is part of what you do, which it is, and I do, and probably most of everybody on the panel, then what we want to do is to help people re-image their anxiety and their fear. And I think that that's what this hopeful panel is about, because we're all hopeful. We're all hoping to make some kind of change. And so if we were to be thinking in terms of being an astrologer in practice with client in room, sitting with us, then we need to think in terms of let's go first to the place that's scariest, and and help them, relieve them of their fear by explaining, and maybe even using yourself as an example, but by explaining the integrity that the horoscope holds, and that it is a moment in time, and it continues to move. And so that, we're not stuck in the natal chart. We're actually in a state of constant evolution. I mean, for example, the moon in the horoscope goes around in your first 30 days of life. The moon has traverse the entire horoscope, making every possible aspect, and therefore making the moon the archetype of what your emotional and infantile, which we all have, responses are based upon. The sun goes around once a year, okay? And that's the second most important image, and that is that our deep levels of unconscious embedding of the environment in which we are born, in which we are raised, in which we are picking up on an emotional level, is actually only 30 days long. And we have been living it for like 72 years. But if we look at the sun, we can think, oh, well, that's different. What we have here is a possible year and many years that we'll be following, and we can evolve. So some of us are stuck in the emotional plane. Very difficult. I like the ideas that are coming up. I really do, about alternatives to being stuck in the emotional anxiety, fear. Yeah? Because that's not going to help, is it? It's not helping. I mean, I don't think it's bad if somebody goes to the room and cries quietly to themselves about the misery of the world. That's fine. We have to bless it as well, and say, the world is sad. I am sad, and it's okay. And I think that's where practicing astrology really helps, because it helps people recognize their place in the universe, and that is not ever bad.
Okay, Erin, fantastic. This is going really well. Can we now please hear from Patricia Walsh?
Oh.
Patricia, please unmute and go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Erin. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Wow. I was thinking about how to nutshell what I wanted to say, because I think everybody had to do that, because that's almost impossible. And what occurred to me was the vision hasn't formed yet. And I'm glad that, at least this vision, it's not that there aren't visions, but the collective dream that we're emerging from, and I'm glad Anthony pointed out this Neptune, and sitting in the middle of its own rulership, because I do think this is important. I mean, there's so many things going on. We're in a winter phase, right? Ever since Pluto went into Capricorn, it's the words that came to me then, as well as, the global recession happened immediately, like the second Pluto went into Capricorn. And then we are coming off the heels of the Pluto-Uranus squares. You mentioned the Arab world, and it was the Arab Spring that kind of kicked off those Pluto-Uranus squares.
Yes, it was.
Geopolitical events.
The Neptune return marks the anniversary of the discovery of oil. Because
right, you said that. Yeah. No, I know. So there are so many cycles within cycles. Thank you, the Mayans, for giving us the perspective that time is circular and not linear, right? And that there's cycles within cycles within cycles, and we are in cycles within cycles. And as Louise was even saying, the one thing that I think I haven't really heard anybody talk about is that the ending, we're in the balsamic cycle of the last synodic cycle of Pluto, Saturn, and Libra, right? And when we look at that epoch, we look at, this window of time from 1982 to now, and how that's been characterized in the collective. We're looking at the kind of the best of that and the most absurd of that, right? Because it's coming to an end. And when things come to an end, they kind of make a punctuation. There's a period at the end of the sentence, or an exclamation point at the end of the sentence. So we're hearing the last, or we're in the last of the extremity of, and I mean, when we look at, the US and the polarity and all of the stuff that's going on, to me, that is an indication of the balsamic ending of the Pluto, 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 Saturn, Libra synod.
Yes.
right? So the swinging of the pendulum to find the balance. Now there's a lot of wonderful things that came out of this last Pluto Libra, synodic cycle, right? Some of them we've talked about, the internet and communication, and the equality of gender, and the extremity of these issues, and all of these, and the idea of gender fluid, all of these beautiful things. Yet at the same time, everything, especially with the drumbeat of Pluto in Capricorn, the thing that I want to say is I have hope, but I also know we are collectively doing shadow work, and shadow work is not pretty. And it's, as Ryan said, we are he said, an endarkment period, which I agree with, but I would say even leading up to the US's Pluto return, which we have in 2022, which we're in now, psychically.
Yeah, we're to the sun.
In the
Pluto is opposite. No, I'm just going to point out that Pluto is opposite the sun when America was founded.
Right. So as a nation, we're in the process of our first Pluto return, which to me is an ensoulment process, right? So when we talk about it from an esoteric astrology perspective, the soul of nations gets born through particular long cycles. The US, even though we project an image of having soul and spirit and people look to us for inspiration, we have yet to become ensouled, right? And the process, and unfortunately it colors so much of the global perspective because of being a global power. The process of the US's shadow is, Jung said this. He said, if you don't deal with your shadow, it will become more and more caricature-like, more and more cartoon-like.
Yes.
Well, and Trump is everything about the US that we've never owned, right? The racism, the patriarchal, the power, the hypocrisy, the ADD culture, right? I mean, he is the cartoon of our shadow.
Oh, he's fabulous.
Right? And so, he's the caricature of it. So
I didn't vote for him. So,
so we need this, though. And I mean, somebody else, I think Anthony said that. Of course, the stuff has to come to the surface, and it isn't pretty. And I don't think it's going to get prettier with Pluto and Saturn. And I think that so we have a collective process going on that we're subsumed in. And I agree with what everybody said. When Pluto went into Capricorn, before it happened, my guides kept saying to me, and I didn't get it until I felt the energy. They kept saying to me, every morning, you need to wake up and you need to separate out what belongs to you and what isn't you, right? And in other words, they were preparing me for this collective morass that we're in right now, the collective chaos that we're in right now. And they meant that in the collective sense, because as soon as Pluto went into Capricorn, the grief was so intense, the collective grief, the energy of everybody losing their homes, losing really, we're still in that energy, we can pretend we're not, but we are. So when you talk about rage is often a defense against grief, right? Rage is often, if you penetrate deeper into rage, you often come to grief. So my point here is, and as you just said before, Erin, grieving is okay, because we are at the ending of many cycles, right? And the winter of our discontent is a Pluto in Capricorn kind of energy, right? That's the words that came to me
If we can't grieve it, then we can't let go of it, you see.
Yeah.
And I mean, grief is an incredibly important time. I mean, look at when Persephone was taken into the underworld. And there was nothing that could be done. My view of this is that Persephone was a teenager who was very curious. She wandered away from her tribe, her schoolmates. She took a look at this guy that uprushed from the underworld, all dressed in leather and black horses and a great chariot. And she goes, whoa, I'm going. She went for it, right? So she goes into the underworld and she becomes the guardian of the shades.
Yeah.
And she becomes a gentle woman who is matured, and becomes, emotionally mature. And when she rises, there's a beautiful photograph, which I don't have on my slides here, of her rising.
I have it. I have that. I just gave a presentation on that, and I have that painting.
On one side and Hermes at the
Hermes is taking her up. Yes, it's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, no,
yes.
and the Hecate is the guardian, you see.
Yeah.
And so so she's flying up, Mama, Mama, I'm a queen.
I know.
I'm a wife. I'm a woman. I'm great. And it's like, okay. So in order for us to come to our fullest and most juicy part of our nature and ourselves, we have to go and meet with Hades in order to be able to become.
Absolutely. This is the shadow work is synonymous with ensoulment. I mean, prior to Persephone, there was, Inanna doing the underworld journey. And that wasn't appropriated by the heroes until, the whole Gilgamesh thing. And, it was always a feminine journey, the understanding that the plunge is into the emotional body, it's into the subconscious content, it's into those realms, right?
Yeah.
So yes, so what I would say though is we are collectively in this process, but individually this also means tending, because if we think of Capricorn as an archetype of winter, but we're also pruning and we're cleaning and we're making way for the new things that are going to grow through the winter period. So we need to do our own tending to our inner world. We need to also So when we get triggered by Trump or this politician or that one or this one, we need to look at ourselves.
You see, the problem is the change is going to take a long time. The Saturn Pluto conjunction, Pluto is elongating. There will be when it was going over my Scorpio planets and squaring my Leo planets, it was like 8 years of death and destruction in my life, but also I wrote a bunch of books. Okay, if it gets into Taurus, 32 years in Taurus. Now, can you imagine being a Taurus with a 32 of this uprising of the interior life and the world of soul, which is where he's the guardian of the soul. Yeah. So we have to look at Pluto in different ways. And I know everybody on our panel is, I'm absolutely stunned with the loquaciousness and the beauty of this, what's being talked about. But, I do have a fondness for Hades only because I do recognize the cycle of death and rebirth in my own thinking. Like I can get up this morning and think something like, oh, I'm going to do this work today and I won't be able to do it. It'll be terrible. I'll just be dreadful and I won't be able to do it. And I go, excuse me, there's another side to this. So then I have to, I flip it over. And so I think when we go to our dark side, what we're doing is we're testing our mettle. And so going to Hades can make you a queen.
Yeah, well, Persephone wasn't on Descended Maiden before. When she comes out, she is queen of the underworld. But that means that she has become ensouled. Before that, she was just flitting around in the kind of surface and still being exactly.
Picking flowers.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and even the fact that she was sniffing a narcissus when she was supposed to be snagged. I mean, this is self-knowledge, right?
Have you ever, the sniff of a narcissus smells like death?
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
No, it's a terrible smell. It's a weird smell.
Right, but it's still the desire to know oneself, right? Pathologically, it becomes narcissism, but and again, speaking of the U.S.'s shadow, right? Narcissism. So my point, and we would say narcissist in chief, right? But the point is, but this is all the things that we as a society. There's a couple of things I just want to mention quickly. I do feel that we are in a shift of power from the West to the East, and these cycles have happened before, and it's kind of like the hemispheres of the brain, the right brain and left brain, are represented culturally on a kind of geocultural level. Well, so the West is very much ingrained in this whole rationalist, materialist, reductionist, while the East has represented more of the illogical, unlogical, linear right brain stuff. Even the languages are much more symbolic, right? Asian
Very
languages.
interesting, yeah.
And I
'cause-
think that, well, here's the interesting thing though, because we're seeing it with Russia coming back into the world stage. Now I know these are all power grabs. These are all Pluto Capricorn death throes of patriarchy power grabs.
It's politics.
But there's a flow underneath it, right? Russia is the gateway to the East. Right, they're kind of like the corpus callosum, right? You know, right in the middle of the right brain, left brain. So, I think that there is this shifting of power that we will see geopolitically. You know, the fall of the old empires, the fall of the old colonials. I'm not saying it's better. I don't know how it's going to. You know, I don't know what that's going to mean. Hopefully, it means a more multinational approach as we see the breakdown of the old empires.
Excuse me, multinational is a weird word, you know, because
Yeah.
there's no such thing. And like, it just won't work. I mean, it was.
Well, I guess I meant to say universal would be better, you know?
Yeah, said that he thought that, oh God, now I've forgotten it. Sorry, go ahead. Never mind.
No, I guess I would, I guess, you know, because again, we're all kind of looking to, oh God, we can't wait till Pluto and Saturn get into Aquarius, because we feel like there's going to be some kind of, like I said, the vision hasn't formed yet, right?
Let's go back to astrology. It's hilarious because astrology doesn't end.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got my solar return sitting up here, and I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, oh my God, it's like 16 degrees of Saturn, or of Capricorn, 20 degrees of Pluto in my 7th house. And I'm going, oh dear, that's interesting. So I'm going to have a transformation in relationships. And that means my relationship with the world, because this is global conjunction, Saturn and Pluto. Because that's what we're meant to be talking about, is how do the Saturn used to be the old boundary of the solar system and our planetary array and horoscope. And then there was Uranus, and then there was Neptune, and then Pluto.
Right.
Okay, so Hades and Kronos have a relationship.
Absolutely.
Boundaries, right? And when I look at this picture here of her, there's Hermes ever at the ready, and she's being taken into the underworld. There was no rape. She volunteered.
Well, it's the same as, but see, that's a patricized version, because if you listen, you know, in the original Anonymous that they said she put her ear to the ground, meant that when Inanna made her descent, she went, you know, then there's the other stories of she went to Erishkigal's, you know, the funeral and all this. But it says initially she put her ear to the ground and listened. And even in the Greco-Roman myths, there are versions where Persephone went willingly. It wasn't a snatch and rape, right?
Well,
following, sorry.
Translation. The Greek it's difficult to translate because it's a much more comprehensive kind of language. Yeah, so it's very difficult to translate Greek into English in a way which actually brings and carries the original meaning.
Right.
And so, but what, like, you know, Gandhi said, he said, well, gee, Western civilization, it sounds like a great idea. Shame it's not working.
Well, it's what Bertrand Russell said about Christianity. It's a great idea that nobody's ever tried, right? So, I mean, you know, just to sum it up, this is what Jung talked about too, that famous Jung quote where he said, we don't become enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Absolutely. And this is the process we are collectively.
Well, I mean, the darker our shadow, it's a result of the brightness of the light.
Yes.
So, yeah. So if it's a cloudy day, the shadow's foggy. But if it's a beautiful, clear day, like it always is here, we have these really, really clear shadows.
Yeah.
And then if it's at noon, there's a little pool around your feet. So at high noon, which is the enlightenment point, there is no real shadow. Yeah. It's like it's embodied in the body being reflected. So, yeah, I mean, but the astrology of it is interesting because, you know, in the ancient world, if we go back to the Mesopotamians, astrology was a literal language, whereas now we're infusing it with mythology and
Yes. Yes.
all these books I've got, you know, and so I think that astrology is undergoing a massive reorientation.
I have said the same. Well, again, the Pluto
And
Capricorn thing, I've said the same thing too. Yeah.
In this panel, because we don't have forever to do it, but we could always do another one. But I think the evolution and the I mean, I have a lot of thoughts about this, being my age and being 50 and, you know, knowing everybody pretty much and working all the conferences and really enjoying and loving my friends and being very fortunate. But at the same time, I'm recognizing that there is something going on that I have to say to myself, Erin, maybe you're just getting old. Yeah, because the astrology world itself is beginning to change. And that will change the more spiritual aspect of astrology, even though I'm not necessarily, I don't use that word loosely. And I never impose spiritualism onto any of my clients, but I use the word loosely, but I do think that there's some kind of soul change shifting in astrology too.
Well, I think that we've even noticed since Pluto went into Capricorn, and a lot of astrologers were saying, you know, this is the time
only 7 years ago. I'm talking like
no. But what I want to say is that what we've seen is also in line with what's going on. You know, the cardinal archetypes often learn by 2 steps. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And so even in astrology, there's been a revisiting back to, you know, the traditional, and there's been a huge resurgence of that.
Oh, that went back. Listen, we're going back to Rob Hand and our hat. I mean,
you're right. Yeah.
This is not what people are doing now who are under 40. They are not.
Well, the younger generation, Chris Brennan is a big proponent in that world, the Hellenistic.
Chris is definitely.
I mean, I see a lot of the younger generation. I see them doing 2 things. One is into experiential, because we've got the Pluto Scorps there. They want direct experience. And then the other is this kind of going back to our roots to see what it means for us today, you know? It's interesting.
Okay, how about we try and move on, if that's okay?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Erin. This is just so wonderful. So let's move now to Daniel. Please go ahead, Daniel.
Hello, Erin, thank you so much, and thank you for organizing. This is remarkable.
I'm just loving it. I'm just crazy with love with it. I mean, thank you for being there. I mean, Linda and it was weird. 2 days before, I emailed her. I said, you know, I'm supposed to be doing a talk. And then we went, oh my God. So we decided to do a panel, and all of you guys showed up, which is fabulous.
Well, it really works. I'm going to borrow something from Patricia. This is a Kairos moment. So,
okay. Kairos. Oh, I love that word.
Yep. All right. So I want to thank you guys for inviting Eris, because I was feeling a little uncomfortable inviting her to this party, but she really does belong here. And I'll start at the top with the reason why. I've done a lot of research recently.
Unwelcome wedding guest.
Well, let me
you explain.
It's all good. I've done a lot of research with her recently, and I came up with a remarkable event. Yep. I went back and I was looking for other incidences of this last quarter square from Pluto in Capricorn to Chiron in Eris. And the last one, the only one that I could find was in the axial age, 7th century BC, in 690 BC. And it happened the year that the Upanishads were written. So I kind of latched onto that. I said, this is an anchor. This is something that's very helpful.
I love when people tell me stuff I didn't know. This is brilliant. It was?
Yeah.
Upanishads?
Yeah, there obviously have been a number of other last quarter squares, but Eris has a 500-year orbit. She spends 120 years of that in the sign of Aries. which not understandably
Interesting.
belongs to her brother. She's very comfortable in her brother's house, so
Oh,
she's here for
Eros.
Eris. Yes, her brother is Eris, but she spends 120 years in Aries, and she meets up with Uranus twice as a result because of Uranus's 84-year cycle. But because the Pluto and Eris ellipses are so ordinary, so elliptical, they never meet up or just have not met up in this cardinal square. So it's a remarkable event just on its face, and I think it's really an outstanding event. We really have to watch and see how it unfolds. But I want to talk about Eris a little bit, because I think she's also been, we tend to be reductionist, and we come up with keywords and stories, and we tell the story and we think that's the whole truth, and it's only part of the truth. It's a very Sagittarian thing. It's not very Pisces. It doesn't have all of it. It's only got or it's only got a personal part of it, so to speak. Eris, yes, Eris threw the golden apple into the party. I'm going to back up. Donald Trump is our golden apple at the moment, just to kind of give you a hint of how I'm viewing all this. He is the apple into the party. He was the disruption that was thrown into us, and I'll come back to that. But okay, so
heuristic. When someone is heuristic, all they want to do is make war.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So at any rate, yes, she's responsible for starting the Trojan War. But what was the actual effect of the Trojan War? It brought to an end the Greek classical age. We read the Odyssey and we find that that all of the heroes of Greek mythology are in the underworld. Odysseus goes to visit them. They've all been killed. The Iliad describes the decimation of Greek culture. And she was responsible for that. So we have to ask ourselves, is there value to this disruption to, Uranus? We know Uranus, he's the great interrupter, the disruptor. We love it when he comes along and he shakes things up and he crystallizes everything and we move on. And so Eris kind of plays that role too. According to Hesiod, there were two Erises. Okay, there wasn't just one. Excuse me, it's Homer. There were two Erises, and the second Eris actually made men envious, but the purpose of the envy was to encourage them in their work. And what is happening, if Eris really came on the radar.
True. Daniel, let me just say, I agree with you here out loud. If you actually, when people say that they're jealous of someone, I say, no, say that what you are is you have part of yourself that recognizes that you could become the thing that you like or are jealous of.
It's a projection. It's a total projection, right? It's a seventh house projection.
There you go. Yeah, self and other.
So
beautiful.
Yeah. So the point is, and I think I kind of lost my train of thought there. There's a value to chaos, and that chaos shakes things up. There's the not knowing causes us to just re-examine. It's kind of like a retrograde or some total Uranian or Plutonian event that really reduces us to pieces, and then we just have to pick up the pieces that matter and leave the rest of them where they are. It's that kind of event, and it's necessary because if you look at our world and our country especially, we're just moving into our Neptune opposition. I mean, the belief of conflicts and worldviews is painful. It's totally painful, and the Pluto return is really going to amplify it as well. Now, I'm very positive in all this. I hold on to two. One is a kind of a platitude spiritual truth. I believe that everything unfolds exactly as it's supposed to. And it's our subjective egos that really create the resistance and pushback. We don't surrender. We don't accept it. We find some, we feel the pain from it. And it's very difficult when we move through these narrows, these straits. We move through Scylla and Charybdis, to really understand what's happening to us.
So if Pluto's transiting, like say a personal planet, how would you see that, Daniel? How would you be able to explain to them the depths? I'm going to not use any of my words because you know, I was very fascinated by your bringing up of the underworld as it was seen in Homer, and you know, and the two Erises and the Trojan War. It sort of brought back my classical studies degree, and it reminded me of a time. I mean, the reason I went into classics was not because I didn't want to do astrology, because I've been doing astrology since I was 16, practicing since I was 20. And then I go to university at 37 because I had kids and I wanted to raise them. And so I go to university, I think, okay, I'm going to be a scientist. I go to the science department, talk to the guy who becomes my friend later. And he says, Erin, you're not a scientist, you're not an astronomer. It's not going to work, okay? And so I'm like, oh dear, how sad, how bad. So I wander around, I walk into the classics department library. I sat down and it was like I was thunderstruck. I went, found it. And so from that point on, that was where I got my mind, because it brought me back to astrology, which is why it's fascinating that you bring up such, you know, I mean, an obscure thing like the Trojan War. Very few people know. It was 1200 BCE, sorry. And yeah, so I mean, I'm very curious what is brought up for us. And I mean, the Saturn Pluto conjunction is basically on the nodes. Yeah, as it's
yes, and Eris squares the nodes at the time, sure, and then, you know, in the next couple of years we have Uranus squaring the nodes. So yes, there's going to be a lot of nodal activity. The karmic axis is going to be lit up like a Christmas tree. It's no question.
Yeah. So this business of going back, say, to 1200 BCE, because that was indeed about the time of the fall of the Greeks as a global, you know, focus, and that was the time where the heroic period ended, and it began another time era where the feminine began to rise. And so all this talk about, I'm hearing Eris a lot in our discussion today.
Right. She's prominent, and you know, she was only discovered in 2005. We know so little about her, but we're blessed to be passing through the same zodiacal sign in which she was discovered. And you know when she's been in Aries since 1927. She came in with the Great Depression. She came in with the rise of fascism. And she came in with
that's also
right,
the
right. Well, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right? So here we are. Uranus has come around again, and look what happened to 2016. You know, when they conjoined in Aries. Look what happened in Washington D.C. And you know, and now we've got another election coming up in 2020, and she's squaring the nodes with I mean it.
Yeah, I know.
One of the things that holds my faith. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the movie. It was a little movie, but it was just so meaningful. The exotic marigold hotel with Dev Patel, and there was one line.
It was fabulous.
Right, there was a line in that movie, and Dev Patel said,
"Old women were old. I should say, women my age were fabulous."
Right, yeah, exactly. Well, Dev Patel in one scene says it's going to be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's because it's not the end. And that's the space. This is a liminal space that we're passing through. And part of the problem is Neptune's in Pisces. We're going through this blind. There's so much Piscean energy in our world, so much information that we're being inundated internally, externally, digitally, analogically. That we're overwhelmed. It's an overwhelming situation.
Well, having used that word liminality, which happened to have been Jim Lewis's favorite word, comes from the Greek limn, which is the threshold. And so if we're in liminality, we're actually in the threshold. And so we're not there and we're not there. We're in the limn yeah, if you will. And I wrote an article. It's on my website, and it's a lovely article on Neptune and Pisces as with these seagulls, you know, and what happens, and ending up with the Odyssey and our friend there and floating about, you know, it would have only taken him really 10 days to get from Troy to Ithaca, but instead it was 10 years. And so that's one of the liminalities that I encourage people to actually take part in the liminal space in which we live now, and why we are reaching, and that's where I brought up earlier about all these various kinds and styles and schools of thought in astrology that are either being collated and brought together in harmony, or they're clashing with each other. It's interesting. It's a very interesting time. I mean, I think we're in an eristic time astrologically, because we've come to a place where it's almost as if if we go back to Babylon in the earliest days of astrology, to Mesopotamia and the work of Michael Vagant, we're looking at a time where astrology is also losing a sense of itself, which is why so many people are rightfully so exploring alternatives to the traditional, not traditional in the sense of uppercase T, Rob Hand, etc. But according to the using the horoscope, like I was going to show you, but you can't. Well, it's my solar return. Okay, that's a classic horoscope, right?
Right.
I don't have any spots in there, and the only thing I've got in there that's not a planet is the vertex, because it moves. And the vertex to me is real interesting, because my sun in this year is conjunct the vertex, at this solar return, and the vertex is a point of no return.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, we're looking at almost everything now. Don't you think this is a real exploration of astrology? I mean, if we go back to Margaret Hone's, the only way to learn astrology, well, that's the my friends who are now dead, but Margaret Hone's book on, that was how I taught myself to learn the chart, was in Modern Astrology by Margaret Hone, 14 steps to the sidereal time. Being somehow intuitive, I found a way of doing it in 5 steps, which really helped me. But that was how we had to set charts back in the 60s, yeah? And now, you see, what we've got is this plethora of knowledge, and important knowledge of the various other bodies that are not planetary, okay? They're not our core solar system. They are friends of the solar system. Is that good or not? Does that work?
I think it's all good, but I think what you're describing, perhaps, and maybe what's happening on a broader scale, is what everybody's been talking about, is this concept of day and night, how we've become solar, and that we are totally encapsulated in day. Most metropolitan areas in the world never see nighttime.
Okay.
We're blessed out here in Santa Fe. We actually get to see dark skies at night.
Okay, so we've got a lot of points being made, but we also have many more speakers who'd like their turn. So sorry, we have to move on. Okay, so Erin, is that okay with you?
Oh, absolutely fine with me.
Okay, fantastic. So Tara, you can please go next, because people have other appointments lined up. So let's let them have their turn. So Tara, please go ahead.
Hi, Erin. Nice to meet you.
Oh, yes,
hello,
thank you.
everyone.
Hi.
So I had a couple notes.
There you are. Oh, Tara.
Yeah.
Well, I can find. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, in the chat, I don't know if Erin, you were able to see because you've been really busy speaking, but in the chat, Ryan posted a quote a while back, a Goethe quote that says, "If everyone swept in front of their own homes, the world would be clean. # Capricorn." And I, of course,
My daughter will love that one.
yeah. And I responded right away, oh, I live in downtown LA. I said, oh, in downtown LA, we really need that. And you know what? I'm not out front cleaning my own front, you know? And so as I was looking at that, I'm recognizing I'm part of the problem. That's the problem, that so many of us aren't doing the simple basic things.
Like in astrology, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. I'm saying,
like getting back to the planets.
yeah, but we're talking about Capricorn here, and with Saturn, right? That there's a certain level of a foundational level of, are you handling the basic simple business the best way that you can? And I think, and I feel like part of this with these transits that are happening, it's a reminder. It's a reminder to get real with where we're really at with that stuff. I think about, you know, collectively, we can only do as good as what individually we're able to contribute, right? Our own individual growth, our individual, how we're willing to change, though, and how we're actually able to commit, you know, to living in ways that are, you know, we can use the word good, but I don't prefer the word good, but at least in integrity with what we actually believe in. And so I think that a big piece of this is really asking us to say, we know, what are we actually doing every day? And as practicing astrologers, you know, getting back to the basics with our clients, as far as these are some great Saturn Capricorn words, which are things like
restructure.
Yeah, but also, but it's also, yeah, but also doing what you can, which sometimes means doing less. Do you know what I mean by that? Is that sometimes we look at things on such a grand scale, right? So it's like,
I'll send you your monies in the mail.
But it's the thing, right? That truly the piece is like, choose less and do it 100%. And so much of the time we choose 800%, and then we shame ourselves or we judge ourselves for not doing it, not getting it done. And if we would have chosen a smaller rate.
Is that part of, do you think the Saturn Pluto is exacerbating our focus on the dark side?
Yeah, but we need to see the dark side, because it's a
of course we do.
What we are.
Well, if you can't see your shadow, then you know, I mean, the brighter the light, the clearer the shadow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you brought up the devil. You brought up the devil earlier, and in the tarot, the devil card, it corresponds with Capricorn. So, and in that archetype, and so much of the devil card is about how we lock ourselves up. Right, our own restraints, but almost all the time in the devil card, it's usually the lovers that are depicted, and they've got themselves all bound up, but those chains are never locked. It's like they're twisted up, and at any moment in time they could release them, they could move out of them, right? That so they're under their own illusions or under their own concept of reality. Ari spoke earlier about this idea of reality, which I look at a lot with Saturn, because Saturn is the reality that we make. It's what we make of things. Saturn is not forcing a particular reality. It just reflects the reality that we perceive. So the minute that we change that, our idea of Saturn changes. We just haven't wanted to change things for a long time. That reflects us, you know? And so to me, there's so much we can do. Like, for example, I can start sweeping my front walk. You know, I could do that starting tomorrow. And I'm not saying that would fix my whole neighborhood, but I feel like that's the right direction. And with clients, we can give them small things that add up to big things. Yeah, so I think that's really I like to just kind of just go personal and go small, but I feel like that we need to, like, we get lost in the loftiness, and we miss what we actually can do.
Well, when you're working with a client, you have to realize this, and it's very important to me, because that's to me the most significant side, aside from my research and my love of books, obviously. But the idea is to empower the person with whom they are, as opposed to whom they could be. Because they're coming in saying, I could be this and I'm not doing that. Not all clients are, a lot of mine are very together about their lives, but they've got things they wish to deal with and improve upon. But, you know, with this Saturn-Pluto conjunction, I think it's going to bring up for people a real wake-up call in January, regardless of what takes place, about what power and control does to a globe, not just a nation or a neighborhood, but to the world. and that there will be a major split between the youth culture and us geriatrics, in a sense, yeah, and that it will be time for me, and I'm fortunate enough to be close enough. I am learning about what it's like to be a future person, yeah. So I'm me in my office and doing my thing, and moaning about not having written a book in 6 years and stuff like that. Yeah, I bawl myself out. And then I see my kids and my grandkids, and I go, there is a reminder with these kids, because they're telling us something, because they're the Saturn Pluto conjunction generation. They're coming of age, like any kid that's in their 18th. They're coming of age under one of the most powerful conjunctions. I was born under it. I mean, it's happened many times. I mean, Rick Tarnas's book is the best, obviously, for his when he hires his researchers to find all the levels, all the times that Saturn and Pluto were conjunct. Every single time, it's actually blown away the culture as we've known it, and restored it in a way which is better structured. So I think that's what we're looking at, is a better structure. I mean, it's got to fall apart before we put together. It doesn't. That's what you were saying. I'm not arguing with you. I'm agreeing with you, but I'm just sort of rambling on about the fact that if you can't break the structure, nothing is going to change. So it has to happen. And it means going way back to this period here where we have, it's a roll of the dice, right?
Yeah.
And
don't you think also, Erin, that also sometimes we have a tendency to feel like because the structure or because whatever paradigm we live in doesn't work, that means we don't work. And I think that's important to pay attention to as well, because that's not true.
No, it's
just
not.
Just because the structure doesn't work doesn't mean we don't work. And we sometimes make that connection. It's like,
that's it. It's about change that reality by observing it differently. I mean, the dog is still going to poo on the lawn, but we don't have to yell at the dog. We just have to forget about it and then get rid of the, poo.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to make do with what you've got. And what we've got
so Capricorn.
This is just so, well, I just sometimes feel everybody in my, I'm so the downline of so many Capricorns, I could die. But listen, we're going to do this again. And I know that. And I think we're going to have maybe we can do it once a month. We'll have a meetings,
cool.
Because there's been a lot come up, and there's been a lot that hasn't come up. And I like the fact that I always am aware. My daughter, who's a double Capricorn and a Virgo moon, she says, God, Mom, do you always have to, you're so negative. I'm going, no, I'm not negative. I'm just making note of what isn't there. And she went, oh, I never thought of it that way. And I said, well,
Well, Erin,
negative space is not bad space. It's just negative,
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Tara, thank you. Thank you, Tara.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Erin, does it sound like you are winding down? I hope not, because we have so many more speakers. But if...
Oh, I'm not winding down. I was just looking at because it's 2 hours. I'm sorry. I was only concerned about time.
Right. So let's go on, because we've still got many speakers here. So let's hear now from Chad Alexander Harris, and I think you're going to find what he says very interesting indeed. Go ahead, Chad.
I'm into it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. And everyone for such
all these names that I know, and now how do you do? I love your moon and your. Oh, are you a painter?
What's that?
Are you a painter?
No.
Oh, your art's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity and this wonderful conversation. It's extremely rich. And
Isn't it?
yes,
you're lucky.
I've been studying with Richard Tarnas for the past 15 years. And
oh, right. Oh, great. He's a very old friend of mine.
And I'm gonna situate my understanding and the evolution of consciousness.
Uh-huh.
So like the way I'm recognizing is largely through Rick's work is that our consciousness is evolving. There are a time in history where we were less conscious and we were becoming more conscious. And specifically, I'll make this quick in our 2 minutes, is that there's a radical differentiation both at the axial period of religion, basically the 6th century BC, first perspective kind of came into orientation. And then at the Copernican Revolution, where the human mind figured out a mystery that all of the religions and all of the worldviews before didn't recognize. So the human mind at that point eclipses all the previous religions or methods of knowing the world, in a sense that we think we know more, that we're superior to all the previous modes of understanding that came
I
before.
recognize Rick in this one. This is good. Yeah.
And so we've differentiated ourselves and separated ourselves from all enchantedness or all meaning and purpose in the
I
world.
know. So the re-enchantment of the world, you know, which was a very old book, and he came to teach at the university at Victoria. He was kicked out because he was too radical.
Who?
The guy that wrote the re-enchantment of the world. My brain is a bit dead here. The re-enchantment of the world was by Maury Berman.
Gotcha.
Ask Rick about Maury Berman and his reputation. He is a brilliant writer, and he was booted out of Victoria, British Columbia, university for being so radical. And he set up a course where everybody wanted to go because it was Maury Berman. And there were so many people, and he made it so horribly hard and difficult to do the course that there were only 6 of us in the end. And there were like 40 before. He just wanted to get rid of all the people.
Yeah.
Tell Rick that he'll like it.
I will. Thank you. So what's happening very specifically is that we've differentiated from a meaningful connection where prior to the Copernican Revolution, astrology was the worldview, but we didn't have the same sense of self. Autonomy didn't exist in the same way that it does now. It was more of the gods were speaking through us, and it was a participation. We didn't.
Yes. Participation mystique.
Exactly. And so the last 300, 400 years of the modern era can be recognized as an individuation process, where we are separating as an autonomous agent and have the capacity to come back into a new relationship with the unconscious, with the collective unconscious, which is represented by the planetary archetypes. And what's important is the discovery of the 3 outer planets, which didn't exist prior to the Copernican Revolution, but also the depth of the human psyche that also didn't exist at that time. Like the depth of the individual personal unconscious was not forged as much as it as now prior to the Copernican Revolution. So in that same process of separating ourselves from nature, we forged our own personal unconscious, and now we're connecting back not only to the depths of the personal unconscious, but the collective unconscious as well. And the outer planets have specific relationships to that as well. I mean, but on some level, you can see the entire pantheon as the collective unconscious, and it emerges at times relative to the way that we participate with it. And you can see that.
And pointing out this diagram is that religion, you know, is part of the various archetypes that have emerged out of the collective unconscious in order for defensive means, not for growth.
Well, religion, it was there. It's all spiritual.
Wait, can you see my symbol or not? I'm curious what's on your screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, you can. Okay,
yeah.
good. Yeah,
My
okay.
perspective on that is that religion is the organized, approach to spiritual orientation, to trying to connect to the transcendent. But religion has been structured in ways by humans in a mechanistic way, because that's the way we've been approaching the world, trying to differentiate ourselves from the beginning of time. In that in a scientific process, we have carved ourselves out, but now the anxiety in large part that we feel collectively is because we don't actually feel as though we're connected, like genuinely connected and embedded.
We've become undividuated, you see. We become beyond, we're divided. We're not, integrally.
Right, individuated, as Jung defined it, the duated part means to come back into relationship with.
Well, it's being against dividing. Yeah, individuation is being against dividing.
Right, we separate as individuals, but to individuate is to come back to the whole, to recognize our place within the whole of the community. But what I really appreciated what Patricia was saying and Tara there at the end, like the practice, it seems, is actually embedding ourselves in a deep relationship with our transits. Like when you, what happens, it seems, is that a genuine relationship can develop between every individual and the creative intelligence in the universe. And it's speaking to us in synchronicity and symbols in our lives relative to the decisions we're making. So as we make decisions under certain transits, say a Saturn square Mercury transit, you're going to see the consequences of that reflected back to you in the next alignment. But that's literally the gods, the unconscious, the collective, speaking to us. And
that's it.
Have a relationship that we can move in concert and adjust to what the universe is asking of us in a higher sense, like what our highest potential with in relationship to the archetype of Saturn per se might be. That's a relationship that everyone can actually develop. So it's something we can move into concert with. And then once that happens, it changes everything on some level, because we're no longer separate. We see ourselves as embedded and part of and participating and
Wonderful. No, I'm so pleased, Chad, for you brought this up, because I like the worldview you're coming from, and because it's basically mine as well. And I think that what I'm getting from myself, from what you're saying, is that I need to not objectify the transit of Saturn and Pluto, for example, but I need to integrate it.
Exactly. I think it's a lesson for all of us right now to face our collective shadow.
We need to integrate power structures that have become outmoded.
Exactly.
And then we need to, look at ourselves and start slow. To start with sweeping your walk or whatever, but no need to rush. That's a scary thing. Because as we individuate through the process of the horoscope, and as I pointed out, the moon goes around once in 30 days, marking every single pattern that's going to take place for the rest of your entire life via planets, including Pluto will never make a return. When you get a Uranus return like the Dalai Lama, he's got it on his descendant, and it's returning, and it's the only chart I've ever seen where the Uranus has made 3 passes over an angle. And so I'm going, yay, Dolly, yeah? And so when you think in terms of like participation mystique, we're really at one with the bush. We're at one with Pluto. We're at one with you. I am at one with my computer. I am, at one with my cat, without whom nothing is possible. And I think it's the oneness that's so important, isn't it? Of the many, that we are so embodied in the long, long look at planets. From the Arabs, the lot can be said about Arabs that are bad, including the Kuwait Stock Exchange. However, they did develop astrology brilliantly for the Western mind.
Yeah, that was great.
Okay, we've got a little pause there. That's great. So, Chad, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chad.
Excellent. And Dawn, please go ahead.
Dawn, that's my middle name.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you could speak up a little bit, please, Dawn.
How's this? Is this any better?
That's better. Thank you.
No.
Okay, good. Thank you. Hi, Erin. Thank you for putting this together. It's wonderful.
Hi, Dawn.
Yeah. a lot of points I have here, just building on what Daniel said, recognition of that golden apple effect that Trump is having on, well, on the whole world, really. But
I never
just to
thought of
start
Trump
off,
as the golden apple. I really
yeah,
like that. I'm going to have to
I
tell
know,
my
brilliant,
kids are going to love it when I say,
right?
okay, golden apple has been thrown. This is brilliant.
Yeah. So just starting off, numerologically, we're in our second millennia, right? Being balance or imbalance, or the rectification of that imbalance, right? And then, you know, we're on the brink of 2020 here, and the 2 plus 2 is 4, which is about building foundations. So just on that premise right there, we know that Uranus conjunct, I'm sorry, the Uranus conjunct Pluto and Virgo was what kind of set this whole thing in motion. We're really in that cycle, within that synodic cycle, and what we understand about that, as you touched on earlier, that we're in the process of a revolution of our collective conscious, just starting back in the 60s. In fact, I think that those of us born in the 60s are probably, middle 60s, are probably having an easier time of all this upheaval than the rest of us, possibly. I
Well,
know
the
I
rest
am.
of us who are older, I mean, I'm always putting up, I'm hoping, I don't know if you can see the screen, but I'm referring, you were referring to the pictures that I put up here and the result, the bam, 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 the Mars opposite Uranus squared by Pluto, Saturn, okay, from your generation of Saturn opposite. In other words, you wanted to break the status quo. We broke the status quo. I did, myself. I know. I was part of it, the big movement in the 60s. But it wasn't, we weren't angry. We did it with show business and rock and roll and light shows. Yeah. So all we did was have fun, but it was revolutionary. And so the result in August 1st of 2010, which is only 10 years ago, the Uranus-Pluto square hinted that it would not be a comfortable time globally, politically, technically, and personally. And now, when did this PowerPoint originally in mid-2016, now in 2020, I call it the unholy trinity, which are the three main sky gods that are going at it hammer and tong. We've got to remember those guys. The unholy trinity is escalating the global religious war. Why is it a religious war?
Because religion has been used to control us for eons, and we are done with it.
So it was no, it wasn't Kafka. It was another philosopher said something about religion is it was good. No, yeah, religion.
Version of all the good within us used against us. Yes, that.
Oh, never mind. Forget. I just spaced it out. Go ahead. Carry on.
Okay. Back to my point then. We were talking about how we're in the synodic cycle of Uranus and Pluto from the 60s being the revolution of our collective consciousness, throwing off the old and learning to build something new, as you had said. And building something new is what we didn't do, but that's what we're about to do with Saturn coming to Pluto, starting that synodic cycle. So we know that it's the regeneration of the collective unconscious, building our societal structural to form new foundations, right? From new beginnings. We're on the brink of doing that. Yes. But that specifically, you know, when Saturn does come to Pluto exactly at 22 Capricorn 47, at that same point is when Uranus is at 2 Taurus 39. So watching that cycle in conjunction with this cycle, we need to recognize that that's an opening, headed for a trine, but realistically just past the square being crisis and action, right? What are we going to do about it is where we're at. What are we going to do about it? Crisis and action. And so at this point, then I broke down where the midpoint of that is from the 22 Cap to the 2 Taurus. And that is our symbol. And
what was it? What was the midpoint? I can't. right now. I can't do it in my head right now, but what was the
I
midpoint?
did already. Yeah, I did already. That was 12. The midpoint of those two is 12 Pisces 26, which would be the 13th Sabian symbol of Pisces. And that ends up being, per Dane Rudger,
1226, what is?
word. I'm sorry, I missed that. What?
Okay, I was wondering what the, oh, I'm sorry, I've forgotten my question. That's silly of me.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you just said.
No, I forgot what I'd asked you originally.
You asked me what the midpoint of the
Yes, that's what
Saturn-Pluto
what was it?
conjunction, this midpoint of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction to Uranus is
Oh,
virtually 13 Pisces. And the Sabian
oh,
symbol of that is an ancient sword used in many battles, is displayed in a museum. The keynote of that, through Mind Fire on Rudger's notes, through the effectual use of his will, a consecrated man can become a symbol of courage for all those who follow in his footsteps. And anybody can read this, but I could go through it. But basically, it's willpower is the ultimate spiritual weapon, and its undeviating use is the certification of individual worth. Back to Tara's point of we need to recognize where we can use our own willpower to make things happen, big or small, starting with small, obviously, in our own lives and sending out the ripple effect outward. And so Trump being the golden apple, he's definitely using his willpower to send out those ripples as well. The individual must
yeah.
use that willpower, yet it's not really his own once he operates at a spiritual level. It's God's will operating through his mind, which focuses its thrusts. And so
He's a dark angel, and I mean, he's an angel of the future. He is a predictor of things to come in change, not necessarily his what he.
every projection going
I'm
on
sorry.
right now. I mean, it's beautiful.
I missed that. I could.
I said he's the embodiment of every projection going on right now. It's beautiful.
Well, I mean, when Clinton was doing his thong snapping, there was a lot of projection going on there too. I mean, you know, I mean that's what public figures are for. They're places for us to put all the stuff that we don't like about ourselves. So we're about.
I missed part of what you said, but it's absolutely true.
You didn't understand it?
I missed part of what you said. You said something like bone snapping that I didn't get that word. Did you say bone snapping? I don't know.
No, but that's a great image of Saturn and Pluto.
Thank you, Erin, so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Dawn.
Oh, there's a lot of background noise suddenly, everybody. Sorry.
That's okay, Erin. Thank you for commenting and interacting with all the speakers. Hope you're not getting too tired, but we do have some more speakers. So let's now hear from Cathy. Cathy Lindsey, please go ahead, Cathy.
Hello.
Hi, Cathy.
Okay.
Not a bad iPhone image.
Huh?
It's not a bad iPhone image.
Oh, thank you.
Usually
yeah. I wanted to say something. I think his name was Daniel that was talking about Eris.
Oh, yes.
And Eris is such a powerful planet. She's a dwarf planet. And she really she really made herself known right before the elections. And with her main elections, here in America in 2016, about a year or so before that, and her wild card energy and her chaotic energy just threw everything into chaos. It was a total wild card election when Trump got elected. I do believe that he is a catalyst, and a lot of
he's a tool. He's a tool. Yeah, he's a tool for let's You remember that old movie where everybody threw up in their windows in the 60s in New York? I'm
Yeah.
mad in hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. I
Yeah.
think we need a lot of throwing open of windows and I'm madder in hell.
Yeah, I mean, really, I remember that movie, and I was
Nobody will ever forget it.
no, I was back in the '60s along with you.
Yes.
So we have Pluto and we have Saturn together right now in Capricorn, and I'm kind of talking about humanity out there, the collective, and the energy everybody's feeling, and how they're feeling, you know, afraid, a lot of them, and they're going into fear or the chaos, etc.
And bankruptcy.
Yeah, and with it squaring Eris is causing even more of the chaos, etc. And out of chaos comes creativity.
I think she reflects it. I think she's reflecting the mythological disruption and jealousy and anger and rage of love. In other words, she wasn't loved, and so she was going to destroy the love.
Yeah.
And she's a very powerful mythological image. I'm surprised how many people, pardon me for digressing, are using Eris. I have never heard it mentioned more often than in this last 2 hours.
Yes, I've been using her for quite a while. I mean, since the elections, 2016, I've really been using her a lot. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
I mean, you know.
And she keeps the cardinal square going. Uranus has moved away, but Eris is there now. And so we don't have Pluto squaring Uranus, but we have Pluto squaring Eris. And so it's continuing the cardinal square, which occasionally goes into T square and into, you know, a grand cross. And you can pinpoint a lot of that with events that are happening. And, you know, when I think a lot of, because when you think of Pluto and this shift that we're in that started with the square of Pluto and Uranus, this was a whole shift of change. This whole thing of changing and upgrading the government, you know, Capricorn, etc. But it's radical change, and it's, you know, accelerating evolution. So we have radical change.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm very, very pleased with the numbers of women who are coming forth to state their power and to stand on pedestals and podia and to, you know, really be very intelligent without screaming and pounding on you know, tables and things like that, but simply being very clear, very cold, very together. And this is what we want, and this is what we're going to get, and this is what I'm about. That has never happened before.
No, and that's part of that.
And I'm still saying thank you, Betty Friedan. Thank you, you know, all the feminists that have been living for thousands of years. But this is the first time that they've taken over.
Yeah, and Pluto with its power, and Pluto ruling sex and bringing kind of the family.
She was the lover of Persephone.
Yes, absolutely.
The Demeter's upstairs going crazy, you know, shutting the earth into permanent winter, and she's down becoming a woman, yeah? And so she flies up to see Mama. She wants Mommy. She loves her mother. Good daughter. But we are seeing Persephone rising from the underworld.
Absolutely.
Don't you
with Pluto, and then, you know, Pluto and Capricorn, and one of the things with Capricorn is the demanding of integrity and respect. And so the women are coming forward now. They have the power of the Pluto in Capricorn, and that power now, and all of this stuff coming out through sexuality and trafficking and all this kind of stuff. They now have the power to stand up for themselves. And back in the 60s, we didn't have that power totally like we do now.
Actually, you know what? The 60s are a bit, there's a lot of mythology. I was deeply involved in the 60s in rock and roll and light shows and so on.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
And the Pranksters, yeah. These are all these groups of mine. Or they, and I was with them. And but I can't, when I tell my kids, I said, you have no idea how sexist it was. the 60s was not the feminist revolution. That was when the women were writing about it, but nobody, but we were screwing anything. I wasn't, but you know, that's me. Okay, you know, but literally women were having sex when they didn't want to. You know, I mean, it
was part of that free love, free sex movement.
I know, but it didn't serve the women. It was the guys. The guys,
yeah. So now we're kind of in the other part where, you know, we're in the 60s.
Now
part
we're
two.
mad. Now we're mad as hell. Not going to take it anymore.
So we're kind of in the 60s part 2 now, and now the women have the power behind them, and they have the ability with the Pluto and Capricorn, and they're bringing with the squares, you know, and with Eris and now Saturn up there, they have the power now to bring it out.
Well, with Jupiter and Sagittarius right now as well, and Venus is coming up to conjoin it in a couple of weeks. And I think that what we'll see with Jupiter and Sagittarius as it's usurping, you know, being usurped, I mean, that's its rulership. I think we're going to see a lot more justice. I do. I know I'm not being, I don't think I'm being, you know, unrealistic. I do think, though, that justice is going to actually come about. And it's going to have to be, because it will, you know, it's gone retrograde, now it's direct, and then it's going to move out into Capricorn. And pretty soon it will conjoin Pluto and Saturn. And I'm just going to, does anybody know exactly when it's going to happen? Because I've got my, let me get my glasses. Because Jupiter's going to make a big, nice conjunction. Well, actually, September of 2020, Jupiter, Saturn are going to be at 25 and 17, Capricorn and Pluto at 22. Yeah. So we have, great time to have the ESAR conference. Everybody should go.
Actually, my son is at 25 Capricorn. My son and my natal chart. That's all going to be sitting on it.
It can be very productive. I have a daughter who's Capricorn rising and Saturn in her Capricorn person, and they bought a home for the first time. They bought their first home, and she's 50, and they bought their first home, and so and their daughter went to university. So there's maturation that comes with Saturn. Like it's not always about being depressed and taking medication and, you know, falling asleep all the time and being
right.
It's about, you know, really maturing and coming of age. And coming of age changes. You don't have to come of age at 15. You have to, maybe what if you're 50? You get you buy a house for the first time in your life. Wow. That's okay.
Well, Capricorn, you know, the wisdom of the elders.
There you go. Oh, now that's interesting. I wonder what this, she brought up something, because we're really on to the astrology again, and like the conventional astrology, and I'm thinking Saturn Pluto conjunction in Capricorn in a sextile to Neptune is going to be very interesting, because I think there'll be something not quite so harsh. I mean, when I was born, I had Saturn, Mars, Saturn, Pluto conjunct, but I was born right after the war. And so, you know, there was a lot of very damaged men in my generation.
Yeah, there was.
And then there was Vietnam. So we came into some pretty serious stuff.
Yes, we did.
I think we're coming into some very serious collective disasters.
How about we do hear from one of the men from your generation, that's Steve Wolfson. Can we move on a little now?
I can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cathy. Sorry, we'll have to move on. We've got a few more speakers.
Thanks, Cathy.
Okay.
Steve Wolfson, please go ahead.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
You hearing me okay?
I think we're all right, Steve.
Okay. So, because I spaced out and I missed the first part of the talk, but Linda asked me to to speak.
I can hear it. Wait, hang on 1 second, love. It's not you. There's somebody's got background stuff going on. They're not muting.
It's okay.
I know. I have been hearing it for like half an hour.
It's crazy. It's like a radio program. A guy is talking.
I've been hearing it for half an hour, and I don't know what it is. I can't find it.
There's nobody else who is unmuted. The only people unmuted at the moment are you, Erin, and you, Steve. But Erin, perhaps you could mute yourself if you aren't speaking. That may help, because we do get distortions when two mics. That's it. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
I'm still hearing this sound. Do you still hear it, Erin?
Yeah, I still hear it. Actually, oh dear. Just it could be coming from your computer, Steve. I don't know, but if you could please go ahead anyway. We'll just have to just have to put up with it.
All right, it's been driving me crazy. I haven't.
I'm using the background noise these days.
Yeah, I wasn't able to find where it was coming from.
The background noise is pretty nasty in the world right now.
Amen. So I have been for like the last 4 years been going through profound inner transformation, which has taken me very far from places that I was before. And it's what I would call a frame. Erin, I heard you speaking about it, and a few other people mentioned it. I have been experiencing how you can have a completely different experience of events from the way that I used to look at things. The gist of it that I think Daniel alluded to some of where I am, which is in the realization that everything that occurs in my life is to help me evolve. And some of it is not fun, and some of it is painful, and yet there is a perspective where it can all be seen as necessary from the soul's perspective.
Well, also too, and using the astrology, which I think is a soul perspective. Do you?
Well, it's interesting because part of what I have been experiencing over the last few years is that even though we're doing astrology that is soul astrology, in a lot of cases we're looking at it from the perspective of the personality or the ego. And the perspective is you typically hear a lot of people saying, I am a person who has a soul, where the experience is coming to me that I and all the rest of us actually are souls who have created a personality to express through. And part of the whole human thing has been that this sense of separation from that awareness, it's nearly universal. To me, the reason for all these changes that are going on now is there's a massive, massive waking up occurring on this planet beyond anything that has occurred before. It's not just a little bit step into some newer, deeper way of looking at things. It is a waking up that is requiring and will require. We're those of us who understand what I'm talking about are on the leading edge of a transformation that is going to completely transform the world, the way that we see it, the way we experience it.
I want another 10 years. And you know, when you were talking, I don't mean to interject, but you really brought to the fore the very, very unique to the United States only murder by the day now, right? Kids killing kids, hundreds of kids.
Yeah.
Now that's weird because that is the dark unconscious of the collective environment in which these people are living that's being funneled through mentally ill people, but it's specific to the United States. There are only a few mass murders in other countries that are by children killing other children, or by adults shooting rooms full of people, that kind of thing. So that's a very unusual thing that's going on, and it is unique to the United States. So I wonder if we're not, when I look at the Neptune in Aquarius in the United States, which is when oil was sighted, and now I'm looking at the Saturn Pluto and what is going to be done about guns and killing people, so there's got to be something about the violence in the Saturn Pluto conjunction, inherent in the violence, that will have to come up to the surface. It already has, but something has to come to the surface that will address this issue in a psychological way. I mean, the astrology is clear. We've been building to the violence. It was the odd mass shooting, but it doesn't happen in any other country. Never.
Yeah, I agree.
So one individual introjects the hatred and the anger and the fury of the United States, because a lot of people are really angry, but they don't know what to do. So they go to the doctor and they get an antidepressant. So more people are on antidepressants, and then the other half of the people are shooting children in school.
Yes.
So this has been very wrong in the balance in the United States. So I think it's worthwhile to look at the USA chart in this context as well. Not to put the USA down, but to say, why is it that this country has somehow evolved towards the mass destruction of all values? Yeah, see, all values are collapsing around us, and it's very odd.
Yes, and to me, the waking up is, there's a lot of it that is not going to be pretty.
No.
But again,
so you think
from the perspective of the soul, I am getting clearer and clearer. Any person, any soul that is having these experiences, and I don't mean to minimize them in any way, this is part of their soul path or soul unfolding. It's necessary for reasons we cannot see, we cannot understand from our human perspective.
But we all have it. You see, we're not made up of different kinds of genes. We're all human beings, which are all basically the same.
Yes.
Animal. We're the same. So, but there are certain individuals within the culture of the United States of America who are introjecting the darkest possible aspects of it. And I'm wondering why astrologically that might be and where it might be going, because the Saturn-Pluto conjunction strikes me that there's going to be a lot of laws changed, and this gun law may be part of it.
Of course, people.
I mean, you can't kill somebody like a room full of children without a gun. So, guns are a problem. And Saturn, Pluto, real guns.
Yes. And that's not, I agree with what you're saying.
I'm sure you do.
I'm taking a perspective. I actually have become way more optimistic long term than I have ever been in my life.
Oh, brilliant. Well done.
Because all of this is going to work out. It may not work in our lifetime. It may not work out the way we would like it to. But we are setting the foundation here for change that is going to occur over the next 100, 500, 1,000, whatever years. And there are lots and lots.
Yeah, the children, which is us, the children of the people who fought the World War, okay, the Big World War, are the ones who began to make the change. And no, it has not happened all of a sudden. I mean, it didn't quite, but it will happen because the next generation is facing a whole new set of planetary array that will require them, especially with Pluto and Aquarius, to actually implement the change, yeah, and to be more, creative about it as opposed to violent and angry. So the anger is there.
Yes, and this is, to me, the biggest part of the changes I have been going through is the realization of, you could call it, coming to terms with my own shadow.
So
And
what transit do you have that you would say has really worked this for you?
I don't have an immediate answer to that, honestly.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wondered if, because we're all talking about transits and planets, and
Sure.
But we go through a very big emotional, a very big spiritual transformation, or just
Yes.
even emotional adjustment will do.
Yes.
It usually is associated with some transit. So I was just curious if you had noticed anything that in particular, that like Uranus or the outer planets, where the whole world changed.
At the space I'm in right now, my mind is kind of blank. So
okay, so blank is fine. Atapia Rasa. I mean, it all starts as the blank slate.
Right. Right. I just, I was taken by, because Linda showed me the, the initial write-up that you had sent her. And it kind of struck home for me because I'm becoming more and more aware of the amount of self-deprecation, self-hatred, self-denial that is in the subconscious of, our entire culture. My joke a few years ago was, I finally realized the first time somebody told me I was doing it wrong, it was 2 minutes after I was born. And our entire life, we have grown up in a culture. We've grown up in a culture and even a world where most of us have not been supported, have not been recognized, have not been acknowledged. And that to me is the core of where the shadow stuff comes from, because it gets distorted after being denied within for so long.
Steve, sorry for interrupting. I've just got to interrupt here. Sorry. The noise is coming from your computer, Steve. Do you have any other browser windows open, or could you shut everything off?
No.
It's fantastic.
Hang
what
on
you're
one
saying.
second.
All right, and in the meantime, we'll go to Erin, please.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. There's what he was talking about was from the minute of his birth. He mentioned, didn't he, very quickly, right after he was born, somehow there was an embedding. And so I would be very curious about looking at his natal horoscope for the position of the moon and the first 30 days that it went around, yeah? And then the first year of his life. Because the moon will establish every single transit and aspect and every point, and even ones that you don't use, things that we, don't even know are out there. The moon will transit them. And it's 30 days. It's a 29.5-day cycle. Within 29.5 days, you are marked. You are patterned. And so you said a couple hours after your birth, okay, the first month of your life, you were imprinted with something that you've had to overcome.
Yes.
Loss.
I'm not sure. Is my audio on? Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yes,
Okay.
Steve,
Yep.
yes.
Taurus moon, 6th house. Late Taurus moon, 6th house.
So you almost died?
What?
You almost died at birth?
No. It's kind of joking. I grew up in a home that was very critical. I wasn't abused, physically abused, that kind of thing. Just a very critical home.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there, you see, now that's where, you know, the practice of astrology and the consultation room in the sort of, you know, the ethos of the whole containment of the astrologer and his client and her client really is a valuable kind of temenos, a safe space where we can really dig much more deeply, really much more deeply than even a psychoanalyst. I mean, I trained as a Jungian, right? Which really helps me with symbolism and the beauty of it. And I love Carl Jung and Freud. But the fact is that it's the astrology that grabbed me when I was 16. And it said to me, okay, this is what I've been looking for. The answer lies herein. And I've been doing it for 50 years. And so the answer is still lying therein. And so in your chart, if in a consultation, we would have that opportunity to explore these areas of pain, yeah? And see why. Because people like to know why. Why did this happen? Don't they? How come? Why did you do that? Why did that happen? Yeah.
That's my life. I mean, that's been my life, is exploring that.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Absolutely. That's important. Because you're exploring it on behalf of a lot of other people.
Sure.
Because we're talking about the collective unconscious. The degree to which I improve myself is the degree to which I improve the collective. Yeah?
Sure. I mean, I'm a counseling astrologer myself. You know, I work with people that are having.
So you're a helper.
Oh yeah, that's my life. I'm from the '60s, and it's been ongoing from there.
Same.
Right. I get that.
We got the right idea. We had the right idea. Fuck the establishment. You know? Mars, Saturn, Pluto, opposite Saturn. Fuck the establishment. You know, that was what the whole cry was. And then, right after that moved on, half of the people went and joined, you know, became lawyers and politicians and so on. And the other half went on to found other things that were equally radical. And so I think that we've come out of a very radical period of time in our history, recent history in the last 100 years, 2 major world wars, the whole collapse of various, iconic cities and towns, but also the consciousness movement, has gone far, far from, the hypnosis, and it's come into where we can actually put into hard copy, i.e. a picture of a horoscope that actually has meaning and that we can interpret it. And I think that's probably the biggest gift that all of us on the panel, and I'm seeing there are 111 people that are listening to this. That means that these way through the darkness of the times that are coming, Saturn Pluto, is going to be only through a steadfastness to the light. And I sound really corny when I say that, because I'm not an airy-fairy person. But if we have to be steadfast and keep the light on, even if we have to have a night light in our room, in our bedroom, keep the light on, yeah? Whether it's in your mind, in the sky.
Well, to me, more and more, I'm realizing that light comes from learning to self-love and the acceptance of all the parts that are within. The shadow, all the rest of it. And the shadow stuff coming up at this time, to me, one of the great, I didn't make this up, but it's like, if you can feel it, you can heal it. And that emotions and shadow at this time are arising.
Yeah.
And because we have learned to reject those parts of ourselves, so the deepest for me.
That's important what you just said. Carry on.
Yes. To accept to learn to accept and appreciate. Because I have seen more and more, all of these shadow places are actually, they boil down to, in a lot of ways, the wounded children that are inside, that were rejected and were not accepted as they are, and were not given what they needed. And that a lot of the work now, rather than rejecting, dumping on those parts of self, hiding them as with childhood, is
I'm interrupting you because it reminds me of a very important book that that was handed to me by Michael Luton when I was doing a workshop in New York with a couple of other folks, and I was staying at his place, and he gave me this book called The Drama of the Gifted Child, and by Alice Miller. Within 10 pages, I was like hysterical. I'm crying. I reverted back into childhood, the beaten child, the abandoned child, you know, the kidnapped child by the other parent. And I mean, it was like, so Alice Miller is one of the greatest healers of childhood wounds, the author of these two books, For Your Own Good and The Drama of the Gifted Child.
So Steve, if you could please.
I know that book. I know that book.
Great. Steve, if you could if you could please make a final statement, and then we'll move on to Erin and we'll wind down. And just want to mention, if there are any other speakers here in the Zoom room who'd like to speak, please let me know in the chat. So we'll be winding down fairly soon. Go ahead then, Steve. Continue, please.
Well, I think I have learned that it's really important for me to realize that no matter what is going on around me, I hold to what is in here, and to coming to love and accept and understand the parts of myself that I have rejected. This leads to an integration of personality and a sense of love, because the soul that we are and the creation that we live in is based on love. It's totally love.
Well, that's so well said. I mean, I'm just, as you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself of how often I ignore the dreadful things. And so my daughters, my kids are nagging me for my memoirs, nagging me. Do it before you die, Mom. You've got to tell us what happened. Everybody needs to know. It's going to be really funny. You're going to love it. And I go, okay. Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, now Linda is trying to block out this sound.
Sorry.
I have no idea where this sound is coming from. I've shut everything. So anyway.
It's okay. We heard everything you had to say. So, you know, be assured of that.
You know, just to really close it down briefly, us doing this work, no matter, it may seem overwhelming at times, the world may seem depressing at times, it may seem like we're like a pebble in the ocean, but I'm really clear we are making a difference by doing this work and holding to it, and that in fact there are many more millions of people doing this and feeling this way than it seems obvious, because you're not going to see much of it on TV or...
No, they never show shows about all sorts of really nice people having dinner, or taking food to the homeless and so on. I mean, they never show movies like that.
Right.
Anyway, it was lovely to talk to you, Steve. Thank you so much.
You too, Erin. Thank you for calling the panel.
Well, I'm always available for talks with clients, for sure. I mean, it's a good living. I like it. Good lifestyle. Not necessarily the best living, but a good lifestyle.
So, Steve, thank you so much. We did hear everything you had to say. So, Erin, we want to now wind down, if that's okay with you. You've done a great job.
Oh, no, it's fun. It's been 3 hours. Wow, can we talk?
Yes. Do you want to now finalize this panel discussion with your final thoughts? And then we're going to thank everybody at the end. So over to you, Erin.
Okay. I think, I like this one. Little guy. I want my ball too, right? And so I think that what we need to do And because I'm an astrologer, I'm a hardcore astrologer, I think that we need to be able to articulate our knowledge in ways that other people can use in a very, very immediate way. And as a practicing astrologer, I have many types of clients, and I do everything from, how to make more money and doesn't matter. The whole point is to be able to say at the end of the session, of the client session, which I'm always available for, by the way, is there anything else? That's my favorite word, session word, is there anything else? Because that's what we have to ask ourselves. What have I not done? What have I not covered? What have I left out? And there's a lot of positive thinking right now that has has been left out, and a lot of focusing on these people who are really pretty terrible. I mean, not that they should be ignored, but because they need to be sort of, in a sense, got rid of, but not by mass shootings. But I just think that's what we need to do, is to use our astrology and the knowledge of the horoscope and the planets and the transits and the events as part of our, gosh, I mean, we're so lucky. It's not really that common in the world, to be an astrologer and to be one and to hang out with one or 5 or 117 apparently on this one. Astrologers is an honor. And so thank you for the honor of being with all of you.
Erin Sullivan, thank you so much. You've done a great job. And I just want to now mention the admins who do help behind the scenes. Thank you very much, Wanda. And
Yay,
Olive.
Wanda.
Yes, thank you, Wanda, from all of us. And thank you, Olive, who's monitoring the Facebook Live page. And we've had hundreds of people. We've had hundreds of people pop in to see what was happening. And I'm sure we will all listen to this all the way through, all over again. I can't.
This is really great. Hey, Linda,
Yes.
we've done good. This is really fun.
We've done really, really good. Really, really good.
We should have one like every month or something.
Yes, yes, I would love that, because when you told me your idea a few days ago, I actually had been thinking about something along those lines. And so thank you for coming forward and allowing us to manifest this.
I just think it's been so insightful and thought-provoking for me, because I'm going to be spending a lot of time this evening really just indulging in the experience that we have had together. And therefore, I mean, I'm so glad, Linda. Thank you so much. We've become such close friends over these years.
I know, and it's such a pleasure working with you and with all our speakers, and they all had so many wonderful things to say, such a variety of viewpoints. We all thank you so much, everyone.
Yes, and if anybody wants any further depth sessions with me, I'm always available in my practice.
Yes,
so.
I'll post your contact details all over the place. So, of
No
course,
problem.
contact Erin. And also, please check our Facebook page where this discussion will continue. We'll have some notes from Gonzalo Romero. He will send his notes to the Facebook page because he had to go. He couldn't, he ran out of time. He ran out of time, and I really wanted to hear what Gonzalo had to say, and a few other people had to leave. So anyway, I'm now going to unmute everybody, and we're all going to thank Erin Sullivan very much indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erin. That was really, really excellent.
Awesome,
Erin. Thank you, Erin.
Yes, I'm so glad there's so many of us. Wonderful. See you again. Come back for the next one.